Episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. You guys are selecting Marek for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. There's a Table Talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are. Thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk, Marek Health, for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. All right, guys, I want to thank today's sponsor, Element. I'm having fun with ads now instead of just trying to read through all the talking points and so forth. But there's a talking point here I have to read through. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything that you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt and no sugar. For some reason, that just makes me laugh. I've had and have been in the habit of drinking a half a pack before every leg training session, and all my cramping issues that I had went away, because I've always had cramping issues on heavy leg days and leg days especially. How do your quads cramp doing seated leg curls? What's going on, guys? We're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Pauli. Ben is the athletic director of Rochester Performance Gym, otherwise known as RPG, the co-coordinator of Coaching Revolution, and the owner and operator of Michigan BarBenders Barbell. Did I forget anything?
Michigan BarBenders.
Michigan BarBenders. Yeah, that's my. You know when you write and you gotta crunch the letters really, really close together because you're right by the seam.
I write just like you, like a caveman.
Yeah, that's what it saes. So it started out saying BarBend.
Yep.
And then went into that. Also, a multiply lifter we're going to talk about the meet that you just had. So the best lifts that I have down here are 1025, 611, 799 with a 2436 total. Just competed. I asked how that went. A little bit of a clusterfuck, but go ahead and recap how that went for you.
So it was a clusterfuck of a training cycle. I was 1 week out from a push-pull raw meet that I did 12 weeks after tricep reattachment, leading into this. So, the doc's like, you shouldn't bench anymore, the whole 9 yards. So that pissed me off. So I was like, all right, well, we got a meet in 12 weeks. I'm gonna hit a PR there. So rehab that and redline the tricep the whole time. Came out, I hit like a 445 raw bench, which I don't raw bench a lot. So that was very good for me. Week after, I'm using a bando bar with like 2 plates on it, and something gnarly popped here in the armpit. And the doc said just physical exam. He thinks that the one sternal attachment started to fray on that right pec. So started coming back from that.
Is that the same side as the tricep?
Nope, opposite side.
Opposite, okay.
Yep. So started out the prep, coming back from that. So I basically had to wear a shirt or an insert or a slingshot the whole time with that, and worked up. And the heaviest bench I hit in training was 700, which I used to do that for about 10 to 12. So that was pretty humbling. And then squats were going really well. And then it was 5 weeks out. I was taking a reverse band deadlift in my old ass, bent over to grab the bar or something aggressive, and I popped my hamstring. So I tore my hamstring about 4.5 weeks out. So I just didn't deadlift for 3 weeks, and I pulled a couple singles at 500 and 600. And then cut to, so we go to the meet. It was at Janae Croc's meet, our gym, and this venue was about 110 degrees inside the gym. And it was bad. It was the handlers were cramping. They couldn't finish knee wraps. You had to have two guys, one guy to wrap, one guy to tie the knee wrap off and all that. And I thought for sure, I was like, well, it's just going to be a bomb out. So lucky I brought my whiskey. Figured I'd just do that and have a good day. But I ended up getting my stuff. Warm-ups went like shit. We had a 55-pound noodle bar that we were warming up with, and about 3 multiply guys almost died in their warm-ups. And so I worked up to 750, and then I said, fuck it, I'm just going to open at 1,003. Quads cramped on my pick on my first one, and I leaned forward a little bit too much, cut it high by a little bit. Retook it, second one, dunked it, hit it, and then I was dead. You know, my guys were like, where are we going to jump to? And I told them, like, we're going to jump the fuck out of this suit so I don't blow my quads off. And we had planned on about 1150 squat at that meet. 1102 being the minimum. So I figured my day was fucked. I was way behind on my total.
What was the squat then? What did you say, 1050 or 1020?
My biggest squat all time is 1070.
No, 1070.
Yep.
Okay. What was what did you do in the meet again?
So this meet was 1,003 opener.
Got it. I got it. Okay.
Yep. So I had to take that twice to hit that.
Okay. I thought you went up on the second because of the depth. So that's where I was misunderstanding.
No. I'm not that dumb anymore. So,
okay.
yeah. So, and like I said, I had only been 700 in training. So I'm figuring there's no fucking way I'm coming out with a PR here. Yeah. So I had this, I still had this pec thing going on, and it's continuously going on, but I'm kind of figuring out how to work around it. But I get in my shirt, everything was feeling like shit. We were just sliding all over the bench, couldn't stay tight on anything. And I went, opened up at 705 or whatever the hell the kilo is, brought it down, locked up the shirt about an inch up, and it sailed up a little bit high. And I touched and had the shirt loaded nice. I came out about halfway, and then it was just pop on my right side. And I pulled my shirt off, and I looked at my training partner. I'm like, I think I just fucking popped the rest of this pack. And I was like, sitting there, and I was just going to call it a day. And then I got pissed off, and I was like, fuck it, let's load up 804. And I figured in my head at the time, you know how it goes when you're fucking geared up from the fucking meets, you're all fucking nuts. So I was like, all right, let's put 804 on. If I tear the pack off, at least it's a cooler story than,
at least
than 750 or something,
Well, then you know if it's all the way off.
Exactly, yep. So it was pretty cool. I unracked the bar, and because my pec felt like shit, I broke my elbows, and then all of a sudden I popped my lats out where they probably should have fucking been the whole time. And once I popped my lats into my tris, I felt like I took 150 pounds off the bar. Brought it in, tucked to I touched the highest point of my belly. Never been able to fucking do that. And I just blasted this fucking monster PR. I got up and fucking lost my shit, started talking to the walls and all that, So, and then we went to the deadlift. I was coming in thinking I was going to pull a 672 as my opener. That's my normal opener right now. And I had pulled 600, and I was like, well, 672 might be pushing it, so we'll just pull that and be done. And then I was warming up, and Steve, the owner of my gym, comes up. He's like, these are fucking flying. And I was purposefully pulling slower and trying to feel out the weight so I didn't, abruptly load my hamstring and pop it, because that's how I did it last time. And I realized that I had never thought my way through the deadlift correctly. I realized I was kind of just aggressive wedge and then relying on floor speed, and then just it's like a jailbreak in my brain, and then I just lock it out. And this one I was like, all right, we're going to feel the external rotation. I'm going to pull my hips into the bar. I'm going to get the chest up, and I'm going to just feel every inch of this lift. And that was the best cue that I ever told myself mentally. And so I ended up going 672. Second was 760, and I figured I got to get somewhere close to the 810, and that'll be, if I don't hit that, I'm fucked either way. 760 ended up being my best platform pull ever. I just fucking smoked this thing. And then we loaded up 810, and it was my favorite place to be in. Last deadlift for the day. I've only had that opportunity maybe 3 or 4 times. So, and it was mom and dad, uncles. I had some family in the crowd, and that was a big moment because the only other time they'd ever seen me compete, I fucking bombed out on the squats. And then we just went home and drank beer. So this was a big one. My old man's getting old, so I wanted him to kind of see me do my thing before it gets too late with all that. And so yeah, I ended up going 3 for 3, hit 810 for a PR, ended up with a 7-pound PR, which I never wanted to get old enough to where I was at the point of scratching and clawing for 5 and 7-pound PRs, but I mean, fucking PR's PR. So.
PRs, sometimes getting back to it's a whole PR.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's so many things I want to say with that story. So I got to put a caveat out there first. I'm not telling people to compete hurt, but I am going to say that if you're an advanced lifter, sometimes the best lessons you can learn are competing hurt.
100%.
Right? Because it's like not in the same example that you're talking about, but with pec injuries that I've had before for myself when I would compete, in the shirt, and now you're like fucked. You're forced to, right? I would sometimes I found I would lower it faster because I'm like, if this fucker's going to tear, I want it to tear on the way up, not the way down, because I don't want it to hit me in the face. I want it to tear down here, so it's less fall. Then I learned from that, if I lower faster with less intent, right? Still good bar path, but less intent, I had a better bench. Because I wasn't exhausting myself on the way. I'm like, maybe I was lowering too slow all the time. And with your deadlift, the example there is, and I've had this happen with a squat where sometimes like a rib's fucked up or a back's fucked up. You have to make sure everything is meticulously exactly where it needs to be because you're so afraid if it's not, it's gonna fucking pop.
And then I think you get that fear sets in, and then you pull with like better aggression and force production. That's what it felt like for me. Is I finally got that tempo, and it was hard to see on my last one because it was just heavy, and I had just come off a torn hamstring. But like my 760 is I finally got that beautiful, what I consider like the elite level like bar speed, where they wedge in, it's really slow as they're getting that slack, and then as soon as it breaks the ground, it's just locked out. And I had never gotten that the way that I knew that it should look. I never looked the way that they look for these 1,000-pound deadlifters.
Yes, and see, that's a hard thing because you're a coach as well. That's a motherfucker to teach, right? Because you're trying to tell them, don't pull fast, but you still need to pull fast as soon as this leaves the floor.
I think most people get it. So it's like an aggression thing. So if they try to slow down, they don't produce the force that they would. So it's a really tricky thing because you have to learn how to be patient but produce max force. And that's where I think, what I did is I just went back to some old school training. I had told myself that I didn't like speed deadlifting, and I think I was losing a lot of my force production from that. I think I detrained that explosiveness. And I started right before the hamstring tear. I think I did 3 weeks of speed pulls. And then even when I came back from it, I did my 500 and 600 pulls the last 2 weeks out. I was just focusing on bar speed after I had that perfect position. So in my head, I was kind of equating it to like a rocket, right? So we're not just exploding right off the ground, but it's building, and then we're getting faster. So I was trying to get that fucker to float, wedge. I'm getting up there, and then once I got that thing 2-3 inches off the ground, then I'm going max force production. And I was trying, in my head, I was trying to kind of figure that out with my strength curves and stuff. And it ended up being really, really, really good for me. And I just learned how to think through the lift. And I thought I was thinking until I actually thought it was just, it was just a fucking it was the lat thing. I'm like, I'm teaching guys how to use their lats correctly the whole time. And then all of a sudden I unrack it and I break my elbows. I'm like, holy fucking shit, I learned how to use my lats. And then it just was nothing. I was like, motherfucker, I should have loaded 1,000 on that motherfucker.
It's like different layers of the onion they get peeled. You are using them, but you're not using them like you think, the same way the athletes, when you look at those, they're not using it at all, right? But then when it starts to activate there, we share, actually when I was stalking you, we share a lot of things in common, but the one I got to bring up is, whacking your head on the bar, because it's on the thumbnail of the video that I've done there. Have you ever got red lighted for doing that?
No, I got told to calm down a couple times from swearing and stuff. Some of the older APF judges are pretty...
But do you bleed every time you do it?
No, that was actually a fluke. So normally I kind of grab the bar and I go straight into the bar. And I was a fighter back in the day, and I was just a meathead my whole life and got in a lot of fights and stuff. So sometimes I got to get jarred in the head to wake up a little bit. So I would kind of get up there and I'd smack my head into the bar a couple times. And most of the time I wear a beanie when I'm training, so it didn't do nothing. This one, I had my gear on and we had tightened it. That photo was from when I hit my first 1,000-pound squat. It was 1025. And my gear was so tight, I was like trying to shimmy my legs around. And I was further behind the bar than I normally am. So when I went to I hit the knurling and it scraped up. And I go under the bar and I was sweating like a madman. So I felt it like this. I just thought it was sweat. I had no idea I was bleeding. And then I unracked, and my friend Chloe, got that badass photo for me. And I squatted and I stood up, and then I got the whites and I started talking to the crowd. I don't even know what the fuck I was saying. I was going nuts, but I was spitting blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, relax. You know, you're fucking getting blood all over the crowd. And then I was like, I'm like this. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. So
my dumb ass I'd hit it and then in a downward angle. Right. So, I mean, when I was younger doing it was no big deal. I'd just get a welt on the head, think it was cool, whatever. Yeah, then over a period of time that the skin started to become thinner.
Yeah, I got a little callus kind of thing right here.
Yeah. So then when I'd hit it, you know, and scraped, it would bleed. And this was kind of pre-West Side when it was really bad. And I'd have to walk shit out. And I would feel it running down my face. And so you didn't know if it's sweat or blood. But then before I would move my feet out, or like right after I would move my feet out, my head would still be down because I wasn't pulled up yet because I kept my head down when I walked out.
Okay, yep.
And then I'd pull up and I would see the blood just drop on the carpet. And it was like the baddest motherfucking thing in the world. It was fucking awesome. And over a period of time, I started to get red lighted for it because as I'd come out of the bottom, the tighter the gear got, the more pressure there was at the bottom.
Like
so it was squirting, you know, basically straight at the head judge. So
that's why they were red lighting you.
Yeah, so they're red lighting me for that. That was once. Then Louis kind of raised shit about that. Meanwhile, still calling me a fucking idiot for doing it. And then one time on the way down, I knocked myself out. So I got underneath it on the way down and just passed out because I hit it so hard. And then I realized I need to not do that.
I had some of those times where I'm like, that was fucking stupid.
Yeah. And so that's where kind of the beanies and shit came in because it became a cushion to be able to keep.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't bleed, right? Yeah. I didn't want to. That's fine. What if you make the lift, right? And it's all badass and it looks fucking awesome, but then you get red lighted because of fucking blood.
I can't. When the judge, like I've seen judging like. One kid got a red light at a meet and they asked the judge what the red light was for. And the judge was like, I just didn't like the way that it looked. I can't do the judging that doesn't go by the book.
Yeah.
If I violate a rule or my lifters violate a rule, that's fine. Don't make up some bullshit. And like I see it a lot of times in like the raw feds where they get a wide stance squatter and they don't know how to judge. It looks weird from the side. You know, the depth looks weird. The whole hip crease, everything looks weird. And they don't. I've seen some of these wide guys, the wide stance guys, just get hosed at these meets and they're burying these things, but the judges don't like the way they look because everybody else is close stance. Mm-hmm. So I don't like that. Like if it's per the rule, let the lifter know, let me know so we can at least work out in the off season. We'll come back. We don't have to sit there and argue with the judge. I don't care what the squat depth is, none of that. Just let me know what the fucking rule is so then we can prep for it.
And be consistent.
That's it. I can care if you're calling them 2 inches below what I think is parallel. That's fine as long as we just know where to go. I hate these federations and these judges that are, you know, you go out, you watch Flight A, like all of us do, right? Mm-hmm. You're judging the squat depth and stuff, and then all of a sudden they get to the bigger guys and they're lowering the call or they're raising the call, and then it's just chaos. I don't like it.
I've always got, ever since I've been in the fucking sport, there's always been a difference between Flight A, B, C.
Every fucking time.
You know, so if I'm helping somebody, I'm watching Flight A, I'm like, okay, this is worse. I hope to God I don't have anybody in it because then you got to judge you got to call super, super tight.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. And people would say, well, that's right. You should do that. I'm like, well, you should as long as everybody's going to be judged to that standard.
Yeah.
You know, Flight B, then if it all of a sudden changes, then it's see if it works through there. Now you get in this weird spot where you got to go talk to the lifter in Flight D and say, okay, here's the deal.
This conversation is great. I have this every fucking meet.
Yeah, like what do you want to do here? Because I can call you where the rule book says, I can call you where I think the rule book should say, or I can call you at where the judges are going to let it. This is your call.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, they're going to say, all my competitors are going to go where the judges say it's going to be called. So, and I'm here to compete. So I'm fine. You know, I cannot not get that. I've been in those shoes.
I don't understand where this powerlifting is the only sport where playing the sport like that and gaming the referees is like they're saying it's an integrity thing now. They're saying that you have no integrity as a human being if you're trying to game the referees. It's like, imagine watching the Final Four and somebody clearly commits a blocking foul, but they call it a charge. That dude is the hero of the Final Four, and he's not going to get up and be like, no, I blocked the guy, man. Let's change hands with the ball. So for me, I'm playing a sport. I'm going to bend the rules as much as I can, and I'm going to take the white lights, and that is what it is. I don't judge my integrity. I don't need anyone else to judge my integrity. I don't need them to think I'm integral or whatever it is. based on my squat depth. My integrity comes from what I do every day as a human being. That's just the way it is.
So I used to see that argument, and it makes no sense to me because of, here's why, because it's so we're supposed to do everything based upon the absolute 100% moral integrity. Okay, so don't write anything off on your taxes that you don't know 100% is for real.
Exactly.
Like, don't ever, take advantage of any situation that just might be a little bit off because it benefits you over somebody. So never, in other words, just never have a business.
Yeah.
Because if you have a business, then the marketing is actually marketing. Then actually just be 100% transparent as an online trainer and say, you know what, my training's just like everybody else's if you really want to be clear.
Yeah, go to anybody. Don't even worry about me.
Yeah, that's like, you see what I'm saying? Like,
because to be successful in a business, you're going to take somebody else's people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that, everything that you do in life is in some way kind of gaming the system. You have to game it within certain boundaries and within certain laws, that be able to allow you to, but that gray area, if you don't take the gray area, or this is more of my complaint with that is, or you say you only have to take the gray area here, but not in the things that I do.
Yeah.
But just in these things. Like, no, wait a fucking minute. You're using the gray area and all these other things that maybe I morally don't agree with. Yeah, I morally don't agree with these gray areas that you do. But so God, I can rant forever on this. The answer is fucking change the rules to accommodate what it is.
Yeah.
So I put this out there a couple times. If it's a multiply, because of the gear, the crease, and all the reasons that people will give why it's going to be a little bit higher, fuck it, just change the rule and make it the hip joint.
Well, this is what's so crazy to me is that we even have multiply people, and then you have the classic raw and the raw guys talking about the integrity of the multiply squat. Now, the way I see it is that when would you say the squat started to go high? Is it when they started adding layers for multiply?
It was always there.
It was always there, right? So it's I don't see it as my duty to restore the integrity of the squat and multiply, right? Especially when I'm sitting there, I'm trying to compete at the WPO or on a world level, and then you have these motherfuckers going down to an SPF meet, getting squats called this high, and then they just make it there. Well, it's through the APF. So they do an APF meet with favorable judges, we'll say, and they get their squat called high, and then all of a sudden they're on the big stage, and then they have another year to train for that when you got to do 4 extra fucking meets to get there, and you're squatting ass to grass. If in multiply, there are certain feds and certain groups of referees that you got to bury the squat. Now, as a competitor, is it smart when you're climbing your ladder to get to the world level? Is it smart to go there? I would say no. Now, if you have the integrity yourself and that's important to you, that's fine. Do your thing. Go there and fucking sink it ass to grass and take your squat. It is what it is, but it's not going to be as high as the next guy. And I just don't think that it is the responsibility of the athlete or anybody else outside of the federation and the judge to worry about the standard of the squat. Now, we should probably bar the fucking doors because everybody's gonna come beating this place down, but it just is what it is. It was gone in the 70s and 80s. How the fuck are we gonna bring this back?
It's up to the standards of the federations and the judges, the same way the IPF changed the rule about the width of the bench press.
Exactly.
Right. So when that started to go to where they felt it was too extreme, they just changed the rule to be able to take that out. Where with the squat, it's always been, nobody wants to squat deeper than they have to. Yeah. Right, because you don't get extra points for that.
You don't get a fourth white light.
Now, with the added gear, it became harder, especially in the squat, because that's really what we talk about more than anything else is the squat when it comes to that. It becomes harder to be able to break parallel, where there's two sides of that coin. There's the one side where as you go lower, there's more pressure, head pressure, and you get down to a little above 90 degrees, the world starts closing in. I mean, it starts to turn black and you're seeing like speckles and stars and shit. You're about ready to pass the fuck out.
This just reminded me real quick of a funny ass story. So this is before you knew of me or whatever. Yeah. But I reached out and I had just gotten in the gear and I was making some quick strides and I had gotten to 1,000. But I sent you a squat at 900 and I was a fucking asshole. So I was doing, I had one guy running the mono and I had two like 70 pound females side spotting me. And I was like, and they didn't know how to call depth. So I sent you a message in my video And I'm like, how do I know when I'm at depth if I don't have anybody calling me? And you're like, go till you feel like your head's going to fucking explode and then go lower. And then I was like, all right. And then I actually did. And I was like, oh, that was a great fucking
It's kind of a gauge where, you know, that takes balls though too. Because now you got all this weight on your back and you're going down to a point where you're almost passed out. And then hoping that you don't to stand back up. Now, if you don't ever have to hit that, say you're 5 inches away from that, then to me, that takes away a lot of the balls that it takes to actually do it. Right? Because now it's just kind of going through there where, you know, it's as a purist, I think the answer is fucking simple. They've always used the crease of the hip, you know, in the knee, which, let's be honest, nobody uses that in multiply. They haven't used it in multiply for fucking 2 decades. What they're really looking at is the hip joint.
Now, if we're talking about this, now let's put some chains on the doors here. If we started looking at who's the big 1,000-pound USAPL, Ray Williams, the squatter, right?
I mean, you got to look at his joint.
If we look at his view of a squat from the side, this hip crease is about that much higher than the knee. So it's all of the elitist people that are talking shit about this depth. Their best squatter is cutting them high. Now, for me, that big ass dude is squatting as low as he can. That's a fine squat by my standard. That's fine. But if we're going to sit here and be elitist about it, let's be elitist about it across the board uniform.
Oh yeah.
You know, so the whole thing confuses me. And, you know, we never see any of these guys jump in from the raw side into the gear and start going nuts. It's like the IPF thing, right? Everybody was worried about the big arch and the wide grip and all this crazy shit. And it's not, they're making a rule for, we're not seeing these people go out and they're not destroying everybody in the total by 200 pounds. It's just not happening. You know what I mean? So it's like, if these people were just randomly developing an arch across a training cycle and then going out and winning best lifter, you know, then it would be an issue that we would have to address, but that never fucking happened. And you might have had a handful of people that were getting a significant advantage over it. But if they're that fucking mobile in their T-spine and their upper back and with that weird ass leverage, and they're probably going to be a shit squatter and they might be a decent deadlifter because some of those guys are really weird with their T-spine, but they're not going to be a good athlete for the sport overall. You might get some guys that are going to specialize in the bench that do it, but I mean, who gives a fuck about a specialist? I don't know.
No, it doesn't come through in the total.
Exactly. I just don't understand where, especially in a game of the whole sport is predicated on manipulating leverages.
Yeah.
So why are we not manipulating leverages? And then we're getting people talking about banning sumo versus a conventional when for the vast majority of the entire sport, all the records were fucking conventional for the longest time. And then people started to figure out the leverage of sumo, and then it went, but it's like, so what do we go back and cancel those out? I don't understand what the whole fucking thing's about. But
you just ride the wave. It always progresses forward.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It always goes in one direction. And it's
well, now you got the guys like Jamal, the big deadlift guy.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, it's sumo. And now the motherfucker's repping 900 for fives or something conventional. He's going to go to Giants Live, probably win that fucking thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, well, no, this is just a strong fucking deadlifter. And then how many times you seen this? The guys are a badass sumo puller. I hate pulling conventional, but if I dedicate a year to it, I'm pulling 800 pounds. It just is what you're strong or you're not strong. That just is what it is.
Yes. That gets forgotten along the whole way with all this shit too, as it kind of goes through with that. Whereas to summarize what we were saying, it's not up to the lifters, it's up to the federations and the judges to reel the things back in. For certain things like this one, I don't think it's hard to reel back in, because if you go with something like a hip joint, you know, the technology on being able to just hold a fucking phone and put an app on to be able to see joint to knee, it's pretty fucking easy. Now, if you're going to go like crease at the top of the hip and there's a singlet and all this other shit, it's still probably pretty easy, but not as easy.
Well, how many times have you seen this with big heavyweight guys? I had 2 or 3 of my guys, and I would watch them squat from the front, and I was fucking up their ass. I'm like, get the fuck to depth, squat lower, squat lower. So finally the dude he did a side view on his phone, and I'm yelling at him for fucking cutting his depth high. And then we look at the side view, he's 2 inches low because he's got these big fat old quads. And then I was like, oh wow, that's an epiphany there, because that's just a mind fuck when you're trying to judge. And then I think a lot of it is none of these assholes have ever sat in a judge's chair and understand that your eyes can get tired if you're doing a long fucking day, because they've never done their diligence, given back to the sport and actually helped at a meet. You know what I mean? So
the getting back to your background, not how you got into powerlifting, but how you got into the coaching side, because when I think some people see you, they just see the multiply guy and that's it.
Yep.
And they don't know there's this whole side coaching guy, which one of the things that I heard you say that was interesting to me is most of your basic principles on how you train yourself is more conjugate, but with the kids that you're working with, it's going to fall more in a linear, probably block based. I don't want to get into this. Let me just put this out here now. Every training is fucking conjugate. Every training is linear, and every training is block.
Yeah, that's
if you understand training. That's
I made a joke in my profile for it. That's why I put like conjugated linear periodization.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, it's all the same shit, man.
Yeah, but there's a distinct difference between and it probably has to deal with how much you're going to let them auto-regulate compared to how much you're going to be able to auto-regulate yourself. Mm-hmm. So let's go down the road of how do you work? Where did you gain your knowledge and experience first from just the training side?
Just for the powerlifting stuff and training?
Just all of it, because it all stems together. Because usually it's a passion for powerlifting, and then you see this, oh shit, I can do this with other sports.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly what it was. So I was in college, and I was at the time I was still training to be a fighter, and I had blown my back out just deadlifting in the weight room, and there was this one of my real good buddies. I ended up bouncing with him years later. His name was Ron Schock, and he was like 19 or 20. He was one of the strongest people in the nation for strongman. He was a huge elite FTS guy, and he was a huge West Side guy. And so he's like, hey, Louis fucked his back all up. You got to check this guy out. He fixed his own back. And I was like, all right. So I gave it a shot. And, one of the main things that he said, this is before I heard about reverse hyper and all this crazy stuff. He was just like, if your low back is hurt all the time, it's fucking weak. Mm-hmm. So I went into the local gym, and I started doing 4x20 on the hyperextension. And I started going up until I was at like probably 225 on a barbell. And I was just ripping those. And then slowly across there, I started to get stronger in my low back. I had sciatica at a certain point that was so bad. They imaged my spine. They wanted to fuse the discs when I was 21 years old. And I had sciatica so bad down my left side, my left leg atrophied. So I had this fucking like Quasimodo walking where I was dragging my leg. And the guy Ron used to make fun of me because I would bounce like that and I'd be fucking hobbling all over. But he ended up trying to get me into strongman. And so they had Josh Thigpen, I believe it was, what was that? Q method for strongman, mm-hmm. right? By the way, that was fucking years ahead of its time. Genius stuff. But they had that. And then I kind of caught word that it was kind of based on the conjugate style programming. And then that's when I kind of discovered the West Side stuff. And then he was basically a student of yours. So he was always reading the stuff and saying, hey, you got to read. So then I got on and I would just consume as much shit as you guys were pumping out. I was reading articles every day, 2-3 times. I would write notes on them, stuff like that. I was watching every YouTube video there was. And that's how I got into the reverse hypers and stuff. And so I was at Central Michigan University at the time, and outside of town, they had this guy, Jason Piles. And this motherfucker was 6'8", big ass oak man. Like, I think he was trained to go to the World's Strongest Man or some crazy thing, but he was like a football player and a wrestler, I think, at Central. But he had a badass barn. He was a steel fabricator. And they had reverse hyper. They had all kinds of stuff. They had bands. They had all this stuff. And I started to use that and train. And this is kind of a fucked up story, but he put me on a little conjugate wave. So we're doing max lever and stuff. And I got so strong over a short period of time that I fucking blew my back out again because everything was just flying and I didn't know how to brace, anything like that. Mm-hmm. So everything was working really, really well. I just didn't have the core stability stuff to move anything. But across that time, I was actively training to be a fighter. And I just started noticing that everything was getting better. Wrestling, boxing, grappling, the whole 9 yards.
How old were you then? Well, this was college, right?
This was college. I went to school for like 9 years. I never got my doctorate. I'm just kidding. I'm
familiar with the process.
I partied for the whole time. So this was probably, I was 21 ish, right then. And then I was active doing the MMA thing. I ended up working my way up, and after some guys left me and another one of my buddies, Shea Butler, ended up kind of taking the thing over, and we were the coaches. Mm-hmm. So as we were going up, the weight training got put on pause because we started to get a pretty good squat. So we were traveling around the state and killing everybody for the fighting and stuff, and then it was we had just a badass group of fucking dudes. Like cut to now, there was like 5 of these dudes in Bellator. Some of them were in the UFC. There's one that's in the UFC now. My buddy Shay, that was, he basically ran the grappling aspect of things, and I did the stand-up. He's a super high-level jiu-jitsu guy. He's cornered guys in the UFC, the whole 9 yards. And it was this situation where everybody was trying to go to this elite level. And I'm like, well, shit, I don't know if I'm that good or either which way. And so I went to my doctor because I better preface this. When I was really, really young, 11, I got glass in my eye, detached my retina, and they reattached my retina. And I had to like sit in front of like a panel of doctors. There was some apparently like revolutionary surgery on my right eye. Cut to, that doctor was still in my fucking medical records. So I was like asking them, I'm like, would it be possible if I wanted to go pro with this? Now, that's not a very prestigious thing. I want to put that out there. It's not like I was going to be a UFC fighter. There's pros that are just awful at fighting. So everybody was kind of leaning towards going pro. So I was like, could I do that? And basically that doctor said he would never sign off on that because I wasn't supposed to have repetitive head trauma since that surgery at all. So then I was like, all right, well, that's going to get fucked. So then I kind of shifted towards the coaching aspect there. And then when I did that, I knew I wouldn't be able to step in the cage again. And then I needed that, like some sort of an adrenaline boost like that. And then that's when I started to dive into, they had a lot of the Detroit barbell guys were posting YouTube videos and shit. Mm-hmm. And then it was all of your guys' old content from the West Side. And that was the only thing that recreated what we had in our, we trained out of the Central Michigan Wrestling Room. And we had this, it was just no fucking bullshit. We would go in there and most of the time we would just glove up and fight each other. And at the time, please don't cancel me, they had the Mike Vick thing going on and we had matted out wall. So we would all interlock arms and make a half a circle against the wall. And we called it Mike Vick's backyard. And then 2 guys would go in the center and just fight. Mm-hmm. And it was fucking hardcore. And like we did awesome stuff. So like in Conjugate, when you train your weak points, if you got submitted, if somebody backmounted you and choked you at the last fight, until the next fight, you started with a guy on your back every round. That way you got so good at that position and defending it, you would never get choked out again. Or if you got submitted the practice before, same thing. And we called that cutthroat. And so we had this fucking badass hardcore vibe, but then everybody kind of started to graduate and fade off. And then my buddy Shay ended up graduating. And then I was like, all right, well, what the hell do I do now? So then I kind of jumped back in with my buddy Ron and we started to do the strongman training. And I started to prep for Motor City Strongest Man. So I was going for strongman. And that was kind of how I started to get on the strength training and the coaching and the aspect, because I was never a guy that would just jump into shit and be good. Mm-hmm. I was like, I had to figure out the inner workings of every single thing I was doing, lay it all out, understand it, move shit around. And then I could put stuff together. And then my strong suit is I could take all that knowledge and then use that to outthink everybody and then put together like better programs or better exercise selections and stuff. So I made fast progress there. And that's how I got started with all the strength training stuff.
As that's going on and you're doing outside reading on strength and conditioning and, I don't want to say research, right? Because like the internet's not really like research, but as you're studying all the shit that's online, as you're in school for the same thing, exercise science.
That was a fucking nightmare.
Because when I went through it, they were 2 completely fucking different worlds.
That was exactly what it was.
It was still 2 completely different worlds.
So we had a power lifter that was a GA, and he was like this elitist, linear periodization type of a guy. And I had just caught wind of the West Side stuff. Mm-hmm. And you know how this goes. Like when you start getting on the Louis stuff, motherfucker could sell ketchup to a woman in fucking white gloves, or ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, right? So I was just like, this is going to fix my whole fucking life. And I was just bought in, and it was working. And then I started to see how it spread across sports, and it just made sense to me because, before this, I had played 1 year of college football, and we had the most dumbass training that I could have ever done. And I didn't really get much stronger, and I didn't feel like it carried over ever. But then I kind of got a hold of the conjugate stuff, and I'm like, this is constantly changing leverages, just like on a football field. Like this is going to work fucking perfectly. So I was like bought into it. And then our head of the department, his name was Dr. Hammer. Very good guy, and I realize now that I learned a lot more from him than I thought at the time. But he was like a really like hippie wellness type guy, movement pattern. One good thing is he was into Stu McGill and Mike Boyle, so we learned about some of that down the road. But they were just they didn't like loading heavy weights. They didn't believe in strength training. They believed in movement. It was more of like a PT style. So they believed in movement patterns and doing all of this functional stuff. We would have a day with primal movements, and we'd be crawling on the fucking ground all day, and we'd be climbing stuff with like proper form and all this crazy stuff. I just wasn't into it at the time. The best thing I did take out of it was the assessments and learning the anatomy and the biomechanics and function of all the muscles. That was great, but I was just always at odds, right? So we did a presentation on people in like the industry, and I chose Louis, and he's like, well, he's a guru. He's not a professional in the industry. I'm like, the motherfucker has 100 million world records, and he's fucking a million years old. He still squats like 800 pounds, whatever he squatted at the time. I'm like, how is he not in the industry? I'm like, and this was like, he started to affiliate with the CrossFit and stuff. I think it was around this time. There was just all this stuff where I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And it was just so rooted in academia and not practice that I hated that aspect of it. And we would start to scrutinize these studies, and they'd be like, all right, they did like one about quad size for a squat program on college kids with like a training age of 4 years. And the college kids were seniors. And I started reading the fine print, and they were freshmen, obviously, when they came in. And then like, I kind of started to think about it. I'm like, well, half these motherfuckers probably never squatted or knew what they were doing until they got that coach. And then now they're, and they're probably still shit squatters. And now they're trying to, I guess the whole thing is, for me, is that in our world, it's so chaotic and there's so many outside factors that if you just do this double blind controlled fucking thing, it's like, where does that equate to? Because we're never going to have somebody in that scenario. So that was kind of always fucking with me in my head. And then I would always argue with them about training modalities and stuff like this, because none of them they would try to teach strength training, but none of them were actually strength training. And there was a couple of them that were strong and stronger than me at the time, but they were just that strong. They weren't getting any better. And I was getting actively better as I was going through this. And I was just sitting there, I'm like, I couldn't have a voice because I wasn't strong yet. That's basically what it came down to in that scenario. And I didn't have enough knowledge and the tried and true, the wisdom and people under my belt and all that. So I just didn't have a voice, and I didn't really like that.
That's interesting, because when I have a long college history as well, 10 years to get a bachelor's, but a lot of that was just fucking around, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and flunking out one of my first semesters, and then not just taking classes to get my GPA up to transfer. Then when I transferred, it was to Toledo, and then there I wanted it to be a strength coach, and then they didn't have anything for that. It's like, there's like sport management. I'm like, I don't want to manage that.
I went for like it was like cardiac rehab.
And the other stuff was all cardio based. And I'm like, why don't we just do this? Like, I only need so many credit hours to graduate. So why don't we so it was independent studies. Okay. So it's like, I selected these nutrition courses, these communication courses, biomechanic courses. Like, here's all psychology courses, sociology courses, all these things that I thought would go into helping me to understand. And a lot of those things, I guess I did learn certain aspects from, but the ones that I learned the least aspects from were the ones that were more directly related to the training. And it was fucked up, because I remember a whole half a class on periodization. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it will be, because at the time Flack and Kramer had a book that just came out that was basic Western method of periodization, just broke down into the four main phases. And I'm like, well, maybe it will be like that. And it wasn't. It was all cardiovascular fucking based. And I'm like, strength training, and it's so fucked up. And then it would get into, the 3 sets of 10 shit, going way back to that old school. 1920,
right? Yeah, they were still teaching it for bicep.
Yes.
Everything was 3 sets of 10 to make them.
Meanwhile, their own strength and conditioning coach was doing lectures around the country on HIIT training. I'm like, well, at least you could bring that motherfucker in.
The guy that trains, that's what, we had,
to at least talk about that, because it was so fucking frustrating. But what I was kind of in the same path is is you're learning all this stuff on the outside, but then I'm going to their library, like the college library, and finding the Soviet Sport Review, NSCA journals, Tundar Bumpa, shit that they are supposed to know.
And it's old. It's like 30 years old. And you're like, what the fuck are we doing?
It's like in their library. Then I'm asking them questions about shit I'm finding in their library. And then they're telling me that stuff's outdated.
Well, what's so crazy is they're like they start telling you like that you have to be rooted in these really hardcore experimental scientific studies that are all controlled. And then you look at some of these Russian studies, like 500 Olympic level athletes versus like 20 college kids that have squatted for 4 years. And then as we know now, the elite level athletes need a better and more hardcore stimulus to adapt, right? So if it works on them, it's going to fucking work on most people. Yeah. So the whole thing is it's literally anti-science. Like you're telling us to do this, but then you're ignoring the best science that you have access to.
Yeah. Now, one thing that you said that's interesting because it sounds like there's a little bit of FMS. At least there's something new that's in there. Where what I keep waiting for, and maybe those that are in college now, maybe it is there. I'm still waiting for them just to talk about a basic needs analysis.
Yeah.
Like
they would rather pinch a dude with a bunch of kelpers and tell him how fat he is than analyze the joint. But yeah, they did the same type of thing for us. It was like ACSM guideline assessment thing, and then it was FMS, and it was all this stuff that just seemed to like it was like the little, the flavor of the month type fitness trend. And it just never worked. And then I would ask them to help me. I'd be like, hey, what's going on with my back? It's all fucked up. And then he's like, well, you have to learn how to do this cross pattern stuff so you can unbuckle your seatbelt correctly when you're old. And I'm like, that's not going to fucking help me, bro. Like, it was just maddening. What really, the cherry on top was I was in my final semester and we were down to like those like 10-person classes, whatever the fuck. It was biomechanics. And they had a girl that came into the class and she was teaching a lecture on positive and negative phases of movement. And she chose leg press. And she taught it in fucking reverse. So she was like, the down phase is the positive, the up phase is the negative. And then there's like these girls that had just kind of got trapped in exercise science. They didn't really want to do it. They were just trying to fucking finish and they're crying and all this stuff. Yeah. And so I just left the fucking classroom and I went to the head of the biomechanics department. His name is Dr. Wisner. He's helped me out a lot over the years. Thank you, Dr. Wisner, if you ever hear this. I sent him some questions on leverages for car deadlifts and stuff down the road. But anyway, I went to his office. I'm like, this is fucking ridiculous. This girl doesn't know what she's doing. She just taught the whole lecture backwards and we have a test in 2 weeks. I'm like, and I just fucking raised hell. And then he's like, all right, just turn your shit into me and then call it good. So I turned in like 3 assignments to him and then I just got a fucking A in the class. I couldn't do it. I was just like, I was looking around and I raised my hand and I was like, yeah, this is, you're teaching it the opposite way. And she's like, no. And I was like, it was one of those weird things because she said no, but I knew I was right. So I was just like irrationally angry. I was just like, no, fuck you, I'm right. But I didn't say that. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go to Dr. Wisner. So
now when you got out and started working with athletes and working with or clients, athletes, whatever you want to call it. So there's 2 worlds that you live in, right? There's your own training world. Yeah. Like for me, it was Westside Barbell. And then there was like the client training world, which was the health club I was working with people at. Mm-hmm. They're vastly different, and I can't have these people do like max effort work with good mornings and shit. And nor am I going to have, or even suggest the people at Westside do half of the core shit I was having the 100% absolute beginner do. And there's some crossover in there where when you're trying to apply, because I'm gathering that you're still predominantly, you're still biased towards conjugate for whatever we want to define that as, right? Because that changes, based upon.
It's like a lava lamp.
Yes. So if you're taking that bias to conjugate to the younger athletes, what does that look like from a template standpoint?
So if we're looking at, it's pretty simple stuff. I think people get misconstrued because they hear Louis or they heard Louis talk about, he's like, I threw in a 14-year-old girl into the same thing and we were doing all these variations. She got strong. It's like, okay, well, if the girl can't squat, we don't need to throw a Mars bar with fucking forward bands on her back, right? So it was, I think where people get it wrong is they don't understand that the conjugate system is an overarching concept that would guide your programming. And so if it's, you do your needs analysis and they're like, okay, we need movement patterns. Okay, what's going to set this person up for success? Is it a goblet squat? Okay, we could run a max effort day of goblet squats, and they could do a 20 rep max. And then it would be the repetition day. They're doing 4 sets of step back lunges, goblet hold, whatever that's going to be. And then as they gain their skill for the movement, then we can start to throw some stuff at them and challenge your leverage. But then you also look at it as, what's their goal, right? So are they an athlete? Are they Gen Pop? What's their sport? If we're looking at the female demographic, it's like knowing your athlete. So what is it? 80% of the female demographic is going to run into an ankle sprain. So like when you look at programming the right way, it's going to lay itself out for you based on the need of the athlete. So we know that the different angle at the hip to the knee, right? We know we're going to need a fuck ton of hamstring work. We're going to know we're going to need a lot of hip work. We're going to need adductor work. We're going to need pelvic floor work. And we're going to need a fuck ton of ankle work. And then we could just do upper back rows 6 times a day, and they're probably going to be fucking pretty damn good because women are weaker in the upper back relative. So I started to look at it as, okay. And what was cool about it is I was really diving into how Lou and everybody that were the good conjugate practitioners were attacking other sports that weren't powerlifting. And so I think that was a good thing that I figured out, is that what the fuck is there a need for people to do powerlifting movements that aren't powerlifting, right? So yes, we should be able to press, hinge, and do a squat pattern, but we don't need to do that with a straight bar. We don't need to be laying on our back on a bench press. Like these high school weight rooms, they have straight bars for these kids. And I'm like, if we had a safety bar in there or a Mars bar in there, it takes a lot of guesswork out of it, especially for the level of coaching that they probably have. And then we could really focus on the lower half patterns. But so how I would run that for them is, it would be, we would start with skill acquisition relative to what they need to do, right? So if it's, all right, we need to learn how to run. It's like, okay, so if I had them in depth enough, I'd watch a run pattern and I'd say, all right, like, is this something that we could mechanically fix from coaching? Or is this their glutes are so weak that they're not producing force into the ground correctly? So then the strength training will aid in their skill development. So, because sometimes you won't have that, right? Obviously, like a lot of these kids, I'm not going to be able to teach them how to run, but I can use their run as an assessment tool for what I need to drive their training. So I think a lot of people will just kind of do a posture assessment or however they assess, and they don't ever watch their athlete actually move in their sport. So I was really good about that when I first started. I'd go to games, I'd start watching. I'm like, oh, this guy's a lineman. He's like lazy out of the 3-point, whatever it was. And I would start to kind of analyze it from that angle and then set the training up. And then you get a high level athlete. If he's a good squatter, start throwing front squats at him. If you get a big fat guy that has no upper back mobility and the guy's holding a bar like this, trying to front squat because the coach said he has a front squat, then you're just probably going to get the kid hurt. And if you don't get him hurt, then he's just going to train these awful patterns, develop more imbalances, and it's probably going to bite him in the ass come playoffs. You know what I mean?
So if I'm to dial this back, just to get back to the question, the original part of the question, because I just did this long ass fucking podcast on the max effort method, right? Because it's there is the definition of what the max effort method is, but then there is also what it has become. So It's become a lot of different things, right? So for some people, it's, if we were to look at a microcycle and you were to write a 4-day split on a board, you're going to have max effort lower, max effort upper, dynamic lower, dynamic upper. And then the max effort to that person is everything that's in that day. That's that day.
Yeah.
There may be no max effort exercise on that day, but it's coined max effort.
Yeah, it's
lower,
just the terminology for that day. Yeah,
it is, but it's a lot of the terminology, I think, is what's confusing people.
It is,
because they're going to hear 20 set goblet squats on max effort day, and they're going to say that's not max effort. But you're defining this day as max effort, which as the athlete matures or has a different exercise sequence, it could very well be a single or
2-3 years down the road, they might have a max box squat in there.
Yeah, so
if they have the skill.
So another name for that would be heavy lower body.
Exactly.
It's just, and I think that, over a period of time with so many different conjugate themes, I guess is what we would call it. Like when you change the theme of your wallpaper of your computer, it's like a theme. So instead of programs, they're like themes because it's the same base. A lot of these things to a lot of the listeners get confused or even with coaches sometimes when they're nitpicky because of their just, as coaches are, that's not max effort. Like you have to, I understand the context you're coming from.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? So when you've ran it for multiple demographics, it's like, okay, I'm looking for a max effort skill acquisition type of a movement. I want that squat pattern to get taxed with good form.
Yes.
Some of my people I put in max effort. I put in technical max because I know these idiots are going to round over and put their fucking head between their knees, and then they're going to good morning a bar up if I tell them max effort. But then it was, what was that? The Kenny Patterson thing where they taped the 2.5 to the board and the 5 pound plan, right? Yeah. It's like that. Okay. Now, from what I've seen, when you start to hone in on your conjugate training and you're dialed in and you're moving through the years, you start to get a lot of these guys where they're coming in and they'll hit that 5 pound PR like what would be like an RPE 8, and I'll cut them. That's not a max effort, not anywhere near it. That's, let's say it would be 2 reps in reserve or whatever the hell we want to call it. But that is positive progress. They produce a lot of good force. They move bar with good power, good speed, and they practice their skill of squatting heavy, and they're living to fight another day. We've made positive progress on the program. So cut them. Now, yes, there's a time and a place to strain against maximal loads, but that's exactly what you're talking about, right? So that's where the wallpaper changes.
Well, even with that max effort method, if you look at all the considerations or all the outcomes that you're looking to win from that day, a muscular coordinator, intermuscular coordination, confidence, all those different things. Even if you're leaving 2 in the tank like that, you checked off 9 out of all the boxes. Yeah. And that next jump up, the technique would have been a clusterfuck, which is going the wrong way.
Well, exactly. And then you start to get these guys where, I've had some of these guys rolling. One of my better guys is rolling, and this motherfucker's missed maybe 2 lifts in like 3 fucking years on a conjugate program. Now, people don't understand it, and I cut him at the 5 pound PR. And what that does, the biggest thing I feel that it does is just the mental thing. Whatever the fuck's on the bar, he's moving it. Mm-hmm. It's just point A to point B, because he doesn't know what it's like to fail, because the more you fail, the more you can get into that headspace. So if you're constantly out of that headspace and you're just like, it doesn't really matter how it feels, I'm going to come up with it, then you ingrain that, and that's your thought process. If you get fucking buried on a X amount of weight, then you bet your ass when you're under that bar again and you unrack it, you're like, this is the weight that fucking buried me. If you smoked it and that's your opener, you're like, I'm going to fucking smoke this. It's a whole mental acquisition thing. So there's 1,000,001, training concepts that can go into the max ever stuff. And I think part of it is it literally was in place to do exactly this. It's supposed to form fit every challenge that you're going to come across as a coach, but people think that it's fucking bands and chains and suits. That's it.
Yeah, I think that they see that day is progression only. Okay, so if let's just take classic max effort lower body movements, like a pin pull, good morning, fucking low box squat. Yeah. Right? And so that's where they see the line starting. Yeah. And then that can progress up with different bars, bands, chains, 2-week waves, 3-week waves, or whatever. But what they don't understand is when you're working with athletes like you're talking about, there's regressions. They're not ready to do this. Exactly. So what do you need to do on this here to get them ready to do that? And it could be that goblet squat. It could be, a lot of different movements to get them ready to do this in such a way that they can strain and be able to do it. And that's where there's a huge disconnect that I think you're actually feeling without even knowing you're kind of feeling it, is that in between there, because where a lot of people will fuck up is they jump right there and they're not ready for there. Yeah. And ego, that's a big part of it too. Like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm ready. Everybody's ready, dude. Yeah. Everybody, trust me. I've never known anybody that says I'm not ready.
Yeah. Especially, if they're in a group, you get a young guy in the group, they're like fucking ready to go.
They're all ready. They're all fucking ready, but they're not, and that's where the needs analysis and stuff like that comes into there. And I'm going to assume the same is on the dynamic day. Like if their skill acquisition is good enough, then it's going to start there. But if not, the skill acquisition is going to be done with something different.
Well, if they have no concept or skill at producing force, if they start with 50% bar weight and 25% band tension to a box squat, and they can't produce force and they're 75% at the top of that rep, that's basically another max effort day for them. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, so then these guys are trying to go per the fucking volume, per the percentage. I'm like, I rated that myself. I found out that I was squatting better with lighter weights. I would squat better on the top end with my heavy weights when I would go backwards and go lighter. And then so I was like, okay, well, a lot of these guys, so it's just like practicing anything. You need to practice producing force. You need to practice going fast. You need to practice sitting back on your box and staying tight and going fast without rocking all over like a fish. So then, you have to scale back the weight. Now, some cases it's like, all right, I would lower the band tension. Some cases I would just lower the bar weight, keep the band tension the same. Whatever that is, but you have to be able to develop that eye as a coach, I believe, over the long term. And then you have to know your athletes to figure out what's going on. And then you have to make sure you have those lines of communication open so you're coaching them accurately. So
now, do you regress that if they're just super, I don't want to say shitty, but super shitty, right? That unprepared.
Yeah.
Do you start them with more jumps and just work off of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what's so crazy, but like there's a million things. We still have these powerlifting coaches teaching full fucking cleans in high school and stuff. It's like, there's so many, like, do we need to get, so I'll have them, they'll do walking approach jumps, 2 steps, vertical jump, 2 steps, vertical jump, 2 steps, vertical jump. And then we'll do some hypertrophy on the legs and smoke the fucking posterior chain. That's a dynamic day. Because they can't do, you know what I mean? So it's like, and then it's, all right, let's say they lack on the hips, they need hip extension. I put them in a belt squat, throw some heavy bands on there, and I'm like, you're only moving it in the one fucking way, so just make sure your back's flat. We throw the hips, throw the hips, throw the hips. Learn how to move. It doesn't have to be, I feel like what you were saying with the 3 max efforts that you mentioned, it's like, I think a lot of these people think that there's exercises that are staples in a conjugate program, and it's, well, what did the Russians have? Like fucking 400 exercises. Crazy. It's like, no, this is what the athlete needs. It's not a low box squat was in because Louis liked it. And then when you low box squat a lot, you get strong. It doesn't mean that everybody has to do it.
Well, it's I hate to keep going back to the thing I did on Wednesday, but it's pretty fucking deep. It's also the considerations, because people will look at weak point development for max effort, which I don't think is the best place to develop weak points, but it is a place to develop some weak points. And the only thing they ever look at are muscle groups. Yeah. They're not looking at movement patterns. They're not looking at joint angles. They're not looking at contraction mode. Maybe you're eccentrically suck, and that's why you can't come out of the bottom very strong. You know, so they're when they're looking at the considerations for what exercise to choose, it's always default body part. Yeah. And it's like, dude, no, if this is this, if you're losing your confidence, so if you're squatting down in the bottom was one example. If you squat down the bottom, then you lose all tightness in the bottom, right? Sure. Maybe somebody's going to say, you know, suspended, squats.
Chain squats or pause.
But I'm going to say, how about a slower eccentric on the way down to learn how to give
yourself a chance to control it.
Yeah, a longer period of time, so you can increase your eccentric strength to be able to maintain the posture out of the bottom. And those are just considerations, you know, that go in there.
And we have stuff that's completely like independent of like, what if they can't stay tight in the hole because their adductors are fucking tight?
Yes.
So then we start to get into these assessments. It's like, it's just so crazy how you have to start, and you have to always go back to the needs analysis of the athlete.
Yes.
And then that was what, I love you, Dan Tinajero, but that's why I think he did a shit job of explaining on here. He has a goddamn genius system of assessments, and it is in place to where there is no guesswork. And so I stole a lot of that, and we use that for our people now because he's my coach. And so if you get in there and we have direct assessments, then we can start, we don't have to play the guesswork. You know, I mean, the old school way, how many weeks would that take to fix, right? Because now we got to mess with the pause squat. We got to mess with the adductor mobility. We got to mess with the tempo, maybe throw a couple variations there. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks down the road, we haven't done nothing. Now we just started squatting instead of, hey, let's mobilize this adductor. And then the next week, you know, and then we get some work in. Maybe the next week we're actually making positive gains.
Yeah.
You know,
the way that I've explained that is that you can see, if I see somebody squat, it's a heavy lift that you can analyze. So it's a heavier lift that you can analyze, and you look at that and you're like, oh, fuck, okay. This looks like the upper back falling forward. This could, in my brain, the first thing that goes through there is this is either activation or something's weak. I'm going to address it with activation first, right? And it could be some of the stuff like Danny's talking about, or it could just be super light movements 4 times a week just to activate the upper back, because maybe they just don't know how to activate it. And then that next week, it's gone.
Yeah.
Like, it was never a muscle weakness. It was just an activation type thing.
Exactly. So some of these people, if I see them fuck up a lift, I bring them aside. I say, do you understand what we're doing here? Like with the when I say tighten your upper back for the squat, explain to me how you explain that to yourself. I have them walk me through it. And then I'm like, okay, when you say that, do you mean this or do you mean that? And then I figure out, do they understand what we're going through? Because I have guys that can repeat what I'm saying pretty damn good, but internally they're not doing it the right way. They're not understanding it. So then when it comes time for heavy weights, then all that goes out the window because they're not even really cueing it from the start correctly.
Yes.
So then it's just, then it just throws this whole wrench in your entire plan because you don't know what's going on in their head. So that's why you have to have your open lines of communication with your athletes to actually figure out what's going on. Do you understand how to squat? Do you understand how to set your hips correctly on a bench so your ass doesn't come up? Once I know that you understand that, I tell my guys this all the time. I'm like, I tell them, I said, we're not even into the stride of the conjugate method yet. The reason being is because your form is still shit. Mm-hmm. Once we figure out that you have a perfect squat or a near perfect squat, bench and deadlift, then we can actually start analyzing weak muscle groups, right? If we're here, like I see this all the time, get guy here, their fucking scaps flare way out and they serratus punch the bench and they fail right here. And they're like, I need to work on my triceps. Like, no, you need to get in fucking position and give yourself leverage to lock out your bench and then get your upper back stronger, and then your bench will probably go up. It has nothing to do with your triceps. And then all of a sudden we get their back stronger, they're tighter, and then their bench starts flying. And we didn't touch triceps, change volume, nothing.
Well, the difference you're saying, I think people, they haven't awakened enough to see what the fuck you're talking about, because the difference is this can be changed in a week, where if you have to just address this, like, okay, triceps are weak. Now you're going to have to figure out how to build in some kind of mesocycle with supplemental work to be able to build up this tricep strength, which could be 3 to 5 weeks. And maybe you don't get the exercise right the first time, so it could be twice as much. But if you're good, you might get it right the first time. So we're going to say best case scenario, 3 to 5 weeks. And then that could have been fixed in a day. Yeah. And then this happens multiple times over a period of a year. We're talking about the difference of taking somebody that would take 4 years period of time if you didn't look at this activation technical aspect. Yeah. 4 years period of time and condensing it down into the next 6 to 8 months. Mm-hmm. Because especially if you're trying to work with somebody online, because they're not going to get the change of that muscle thing until that next week. Yep. But this drives me fucking crazy. You know, as well as I know, and every other fucking coach or lifter out there knows, if somebody's got something that's weak on a lift, this is what the question looks like. Ben, look, man, I'm having some problems with my bench. I miss it like right about here. What exercises do I need to do to get that better? That's the fucking question. Yeah. Never is it, a technical answer. Yeah,
will you explain to me how to bench press again?
Yeah.
Or, hey, this is how I understand bench pressing. Is this the right way?
Yes.
That's why these podcasts you're doing are gold. It's like I listen to Jimmy Kolb talk about extension off the fucking boards when he's doing extensions. So I stopped pressing and I started extending, and then I go to a meet and I hit 800 pound fucking bench because I extended and spread the bar, and I thought I was spreading the bar until I actually fucking spread the bar.
It's crazy.
It's fucking nuts. And it's like, okay, so I'm sitting here fucking destroying my triceps to the point where I tore one off and my bench was in, and then I bench better now with it repaired in half a fucking peg because I understand how to bench, and I learned how to use my lats halfway down on a fucking bench press. Mm-hmm. And I was in the worst fatigue I've probably ever been in a meet. So you can't tell me that technique doesn't trump everything.
Well, it's not just technique, but you just gave a prime example of always wanting to try to learn more from other people. Yeah. That one stupid thing, right? Because at first when I saw it, I'm like, what's he talking about? Then it was like, oh shit. This makes explaining this way easier than what I was doing.
I think what it is I think social media has given everyone a platform, and all they want to do is pump out what they know, and they don't want to shut the fuck up and listen to anybody. And my whole thing is I'm like, I hate social media in general. I love it because all of the information out there. Because I can look on this thing, and I friend all these people, and I talk to them, and I don't care what level that they're on. I'm looking for something that it could be as simple as a coaching cue that I've never said to myself or said to my athletes. That could be, get that guy a fucking PR. So you have to shut up and listen and try to learn from every single fucking person across multiple sports. I had conversations with a really good Olympic lifter, Zach Caswell in Michigan, and we just very short conversations. And it revolutionized the way that my strongmen press overhead, because we were kind of talking about having him do a seminar, but what you get with, I've heard these coaches, or these conversations between multiple high-level coaches where it's like, this is my piece of the knowledge pie, and then this is my fucking piece, and they're trying to measure dicks all the way up to the fucking moon. And he's talking to me, and I'm just fucking absorbing this stuff because I'm like, something here is going to be gold. I don't know what the fuck it is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And then you learn, and then you go to the next guy and you learn, and then you make it your own.
That's just what did he say that made that change for you?
So I had hired him in to coach me. I was going to go and I think it was one of the amateur Michigan axle clean and press records. And I wanted to split jerk it, and I didn't know how to split jerk. So I hired him in, and he was talking about, it was the footwork. So it was like on a platform, he drew a line in the center, and he's like, 2 minutes, fucking split, and then gather, split, gather. And I started looking at my guys, and they were splitting, they're fucking turning all crazy, and then they're wobbling all over. And then I started to look at it, I'm like, we have no movement efficiency with this overhead because these guys are giants. I mean, these guys are 350 pounds, like a 6'5", they're giant. So I was just letting them be animals instead of, hey, I don't care how unathletic you are, we still have to have the technical components of this lift. And then I was like, wait. I am not thinking about this mechanically like I think about a squat, bench, and a deadlift. I got by because I had figured out the X's and O's using the conjugate training that sent their overheads up, but then I wasn't analyzing it. So then I'm like, wait, the rack position sucks. What's going on here? The lats are tight, the upper back's immobile. We can't extend our T-spine. We don't have a good rack position. So every time we're dipping, the weight's sailing forward, we're getting onto our toes, and then we're driving the log or whatever away from us. And then it just boom. And I looked at it, I go, this whole thing's shit. Scrap it. Change the whole program. And then everything started flying.
When you program for the strongman, does the overhead become basically the bench day?
Same shit. So we'll do a log press, a log clean and press with a 2 count pause at the bottom. Reason being, it's like a pause squat. They suck at the bottom, they'll dip, they'll roll onto their toes and try to press, terrible on the knees, all for the technique. So we'll do a 2 count pause there. That'll be week 1. Week 2, we'll do a 14-inch camber bar, the rackable camber bar. We'll do that overhead press. We'll do a multi-grip bar overhead press because that one's an overload for us. So it's like a reverse band kind of, because with that multi-grip bar, we put the camber around their face so then they can get into a better rack position than any other implement. So then their upper body mobility, even though we're working on it, is out of the equation. So now we can transfer more direct leg power into the press. So I had one of my guys end up hitting 500 pounds on that overhead. He's a fucking monster. We'll do a barbell push press against some singled minis. Circus dumbbell. It actually worked. It made no sense to me how nobody had conjugated the strongman before, because you have all of these different implements. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's all the max effort movements right there. And when you're in your off season for strongman, you should probably, you're working on patterns, generalized patterns, right? We need hinge patterns, we need squat patterns, we need lapping and loading of implements, but we need to be putting our hands on different implements in case they come up in a show, if we're developing them in an off season. And then by the time we get to what I call, so how I program it is we'll do a general off season, which is maximum leverage changes. We're developing closer to absolute strength, and because they don't need to condition at that point. That's not the need of the off season. And then if it ends up right, they'll release the events for the show, and then we do what's called a show-specific off-season, and that's when I do more linear there. So then I'm like, all right, I want them to develop their technique. I want them to get their cues in their heads. So let's say they got a max log. You know, we're gonna do maybe some strict press 10s or something. We're developing the overhead. We're figuring out how the log feels, all that stuff, and then we transition back into the conjugate stuff with the max effort. But we specialize it. This is what's so crazy to me when people say, like, you don't specialize enough in fucking conjugate. Well, I'm like, well, last time I checked, we're not doing a fucking Mars bar with forward bands a week out from the fucking meet, right? So with these guys, I'm like, okay, so we're doing max effort. Let's say we wanted 4 variations on the log. It's like, okay, we got a strict press, we have a split jerk, we have a 2 count pause push press, and then we have a power jerk. So that's 4. So they're still doing leverage changes, but it's with the one implement. So then now we're getting the leverage change, we're getting the stimulus adaptation, all that stuff, but they're getting time, they're getting friendly with the log. And then when it gets close, we start tapering up singles, just linear style, whatever. And then if I had a big enough rack and enough space, I'd have like a reverse band press in there, but we don't have a way to do that. But, and then, it ends up being the same thing. So if it's like a log press for reps, then we get, we take a look, we do a needs analysis in the beginning, right? So if let's say it's 250 pounds for max reps in 1 minute, then simple needs analysis. All right, where's their strength relative to the 250? Do they have a strength surplus or do they not? So if they are only pressing 200, we know we need more max effort work to get their strength level up, because they're not going to probably get 20 reps there. I have figured out my system to the point where if they have 120%-ish strength, a 20% surplus above contest weight, I know that they will be capable of lifting that implement for 1 minute straight if we condition them and peak them correctly. And so then it's literally just the opposite of a linear periodization. We just peak the reps, right? So then in the off season, I want to get that strength surplus as far above contest weight as I can get it using variations or whatever we're doing. And so that's what's cool for the log. It's like we use the football bar, very similar leverage, but you can overload, right? So they're doing a lot of that. We're getting that surplus as high as we can, and then we transform it going the opposite way. We build more reps. We start building work capacity. We build, are we doing a rebound, push press, whatever it is, we start building that. And then we want to be able to, in strongman, it's a little bit weird because you would think you would just build it. All right, let's do 250 for a minute. Our job's done. It's like, well, most of the time in strongman, that's the first event because they want to keep people safe so they don't drop shit on their head when they're tired. So in my eyes, I'm like, we need an endurance surplus there as well. So we need to be able to go for like a minute and a half. That way you do your minute, you're gassed, but you're not dead for the rest of the 4 events. You know what I mean? So it all fits in that progression. And I just don't see a lot of people training it that way. So it was literally the same exact model, but I just assessed it what I believe is correctly for the sport. And people just don't know how to do that with the conjugate system for the sport. This happens all the time with the wrestlers and the jits community and all kinds of stuff like that. They just don't perform the needs analysis, or I don't know if it's laziness or an ignorance to it or whatever, but it's all right there. That's why I believe it's the best. I truly believe in it. And that's why I tell everybody that is, I feel nowadays that the programming isn't going to evolve that much. I think where we're going to see more and more freaks is when we start to get the FRC combined in with the nutrition. You know, you get these guys that are doing FRC and then they got perfect nutrition. They're running their gear perfect. They're peaking their gear perfect. Then they have an awesome training program. I think all of that combined together, they got the tempering, they got all the soft tissue work, all that stuff combined is going to lead to monster athletes. I don't think that we're going to see a huge revamp of some new conjugate type of a plan or some new thing that's going to come out and change the whole game. I think that it's going to be utilizing the stuff that we know now correctly, the stuff that the fucking Soviets figured out years ago.
I think if I'm going to go off what I'm seeing and what I've seen is, you know, it's, as I will teach these periodization methods, I separate them, you know, for ease of instruction. Here's this, you know, here's linear, here's block, here's this. Where over the past, especially 5 or 10 years, there's been, people are starting to see, no, wait a minute, these, like, linear is just 4 blocks, right? Yeah. Is essentially what it is. Yeah. And then they're starting to see, okay, well, what are other blocks outside of those 4? You know, there's transitions block, there's realization blocks, there's strength endurance blocks. And they're seeing that West Side runs basically in 3 week, not West Side, Conjugate. Yeah. Most Conjugate's going to run in 3 or 4 week cycles based upon a squat. And they're starting to see that's kind of like a block. Like, here's a circa max block.
It goes up 5%. That's kind of linear.
Yeah. So there's a linear block in there where now they're looking at Ursuline, they're looking at Bompa, they're looking at all these different things that have different types of block orientations. Yeah. They're seeing they're asking questions like what you're asking, and that is, in this outside block, what is the needs analysis? Which this drives me fucking crazy because this goes back 40 fucking years when this was, people are talking about this. And but what's the needs analysis? And then how long does that attribute last if you're to pull it away? Yeah. So you're talking maximum strength.
Yeah, the residual training effects.
The residual. So if you build the maximum training 20% over and above, and you're still doing some training, yes, it will decrease a little bit over a period of time, but not substantially in 3 months if you're still training.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's what, and then they're starting to piece things in there. So you'll have some examples of dynamic waves, explosive waves, where you may find an athlete that maintains that explosive quality for a while, like 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, or if they're like a collegiate Olympic level like thrower.
Yeah, so you may only need to do 1 or 2 little blocks,
just to refresh
little phases, just to get it back, and then you can pull that fucker out for 8 weeks and just maintain it with box jumps every other week. Yeah, and now all of a sudden you've removed that from the recovery pool. Like this isn't, now I don't have to have this dynamic work in there because it's being maintained through a transitional type of block, right?
Yep.
But I can build these other attributes, which could be mobility, could be, all these different attributes to be able, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
As people are seeing all this and they're starting to understand that certain components of strength can be taken away and last longer. And it's individual too. Sometimes you take it away. You take a heavy strength training away from somebody that's only been training hard for a year. Yeah. They're going to lose strength in a week just mentally.
Well, you have the other guys. They'll do a 3-week hypertrophy off season, and then they run DUP, and then they wonder why their joints hurt by a meet. Yeah. It's like the residual training effect of the fucking hypertrophy wave doesn't last 18 weeks when you're doing high frequency, nothing else with single joint activity. And
I think we're seeing people that are getting back, that are not getting back to you, but are learning the basic fundamentals of periodization. That's essentially what it is. And then putting it together in ways and thinking of ways to put it together that are in sport that typically didn't have it or was working off a model of like, here's Ken Lane's bench program, which, linear periodizes over X number of weeks with very limited variables, 3 exercises or whatever it is. Yeah. Where now there's more people putting it together in more recoverable ways.
Yes.
Instead of, before it was just stacking of shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to do bodybuilding. I'm going to do West Side. I'm going to just do both.
Yeah.
And now you got 3 hours of training.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, now wait a minute. What's the give and take here? And how's this look? And now you take that and then you start to combine that in strength sports with larger talent pools.
Well, that's like the talent pool thing is so insane to me, because then they're like, well, if Conjugate's awesome, why does linear work for this guy? And then they send me a video and the dude's like shredded and he's like 165, he squats like 800. I'm like, well, that guy probably has some genetics on my side. And then they throw something just completely asinine out. They're like, well, I feel like I have pretty good genetics. And I'm like, you would have figured this the fuck out somewhere. You would have been good at something. Mm-hmm. You're a mid-20s guy you're a 1,400 pound total guy in your mid-20s, and you're telling me that you think you have good genetics. You would have figured it the fuck out by being good at a sport, good at anything. You would play college. It's like, this stuff will work. The linear periodization stuff, like pure true linear stuff that a lot of people don't respond to very well, is because they need to do the things that those guys don't need to do. So yes, your linear is going to work really well if you add your single joint stuff in and you take into account your recovery needs and your mobility and your wear and tear and all this other stuff. So it's just, it's almost like they just discovered a better way to program the X's and O's way back then. And that was what it was, but then everybody kind of took it and morphed it into like this conjugate fucking thing and made it its own animal when it really didn't need to be. And it was just it was better. They reinvented the wheel that we were using at the time.
I think so, and I think we're coming out of. Actually, I think we came out of it. There was a phase there to where it didn't matter if it was basic block linear or conjugate. There was a. I don't want to say rebranding of each one of those in different ways, just for the purpose of rebranding.
Well, that was what it was. It was a social media thing, because then if you just rebrand that you're the conjugate guy, you could sell to people, and then if you rebrand that you have this cutting edge linear periodization model, then it's like, oh, what's that? I don't know. I'm going to buy it. Mm-hmm. And it's just so crazy, because like the linear, like you look at Lou, how they were doing the 5x5s versus the 12x2s, 8x2s, whatever. It's like, I've ran very successful ways with people where we're off season, we're doing 5x5 box squats. And then we go to the 12x2 normal box squat waves when we get close to the meet, because 5 reps is less specific than 2 reps. And so it's like, okay, there's a progression, right? Off season, reverse monster and Mars bar squat. When we're close in season, straight bar squat against 200 pounded chain. Which one's more specific? It's just, they're not stacking it up the right way. They're not understanding the programming. Mm-hmm. And then it's, okay, so is your core week? Okay, do we need beltless training? Great. Do we need to assess that the last month? No, that's in the off season. All right, so what's that? Beltless good mornings for 5s. That's your max effort day. It's a very simple thing, but people just convolute it in their head because I don't know. I think it's the social media thing. And like you said, there's too many voices on it explaining it a different way.
And there's a lot of positioning where if people are following this podcast, I try to do a really good job of just having the basics explained, then kind of dial it back, because I've said this several times, but if you look at specificity of a comp lift, I like to always put out there, so where does that begin? There's a lot of things like we got to agree on where this begins. And a lot of times, that I've had people that, where they think it begins is completely different than somebody else. But if you want to talk complete specificity, then I'll put this out there and say, okay, complete specificity means it's only going to be a 1 rep. There's going to be a judge, calling an up command and a rack command. You're going to walk it out. You're going to set it up. There's going to be a command to come back in. And then, so now a double is already 1 degree.
And you have a rack and a barbell to warm up with. There's nothing else. Can't run and do reverse hyper.
So that one lift, as soon as you did a double, now you're 1 degree away from specificity. Because you didn't get the down command, you didn't get the rack, you didn't have the walkout for whatever it is.
Because that's a different squat.
Yes. So now that we've established that, how many degrees of specificity are we allowed to get away from in the last phase before meet? 1, 2, 4. And so it's the same thing with RPE and RIR and all this is like, let's anchor this before we have the conversation. Because if we can agree on what it is to have the conversation, then it's going to help listeners and it's going to help people listening. But if we just throw the shit out there and don't anchor it, and then people have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, they're making their own assumptions on what they think RIR, like I did earlier with max effort, right? Like, here's what this is, what is this assumption on how we define that? And
it's an ignorant audience as well, right? How the fuck are you going to know what an RIR is when you've maxed your squat 3 times? No fucking idea. How many times have we seen this? You get a young kid pissed off, he takes his max for 10, and you're like, oh, he just got mad and just pushed a little harder. It's just, the whole thing was, it gets convoluted, man. The best thing we ever did was every time we would get confused and we would stall, we would just go back.
How?
We would go back to the book of methods, and we would go back to the literature on your site and everything. We devour more than we did the first time around, and we would say, what is out? What are we missing? One time it was the GPP. Put the GPP in, boom, got a bump. Right now, I just listened to your podcast, the last Max Ever one. You talked about how when we get moving, we do big, heavy jumps, 3-4 jumps max. Work capacity is gone. And I'm sitting there in my fucking truck and I'm like, motherfucker, that is exactly, because I go, right now I go 260, 460, 660, 860, 1,000, whatever the fuck.
Before meet though, that has purpose.
Yes,
right?
It does, but that's how I've been doing it for 2 fucking years. And then I'm like, why can't I put 3 squats on the fucking platform? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you fucking idiot. It was right there plain as day, but it's, how this goes. It was, we just, you just started, I call it like conjugate-itis, where you start getting too fucking over analytical and adding fucking chains and too much shit that's going on in my head. And we were, one of my training partners, Brent, had reached out to Brian Hill, beautiful multiply squatter, and we were analyzing so much shit from this like deep biomechanical PT fucking perspective that we literally just didn't even think about bar path. And he literally was like, all right, take a video from yourself from the side. If the bar doesn't move straight up and down, fix something. And then all of a sudden it was like boom, boom, boom. And then he fixed his squat. My squat was atrocious at this point in time. I couldn't pick right. Everything was all fucked up. I looked at it and I'm like, oh, I'm kicking way forward like this. So changed some foot position, opened up harder, sat back more. Bar path was straight. When you know it, boom, right back on track.
That's an easy rabbit hole to get caught up in though, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, because how many things you could fucking fix.
Fucking deep, man. And then most of the time it always comes back to the simple, I do this with beginners all the time. Like you'll watch a beginner, lifting or benching or whatever. And you're like, I'm looking at him like it would be you. Like I'm looking at like, is he fucking squeezing the pinkies? And the whole fucking time his ass is off the bench and there's no core stability or something. Like they're not even. That would be a good one. Or sometimes their grip won't be even. And I'm like, Mom, I'm fucking telling you, I never have to look to
because you start getting used to analyzing these high level guys and you're talking about high level techniques that you understand that they know that they might be forgetting or whatever because they have so many cues to do at that level. And then you forget that these people, like, do you know what a fucking brace is? Do we understand what that exact thing is? And then a lot of times, like, no, I have a all-time world record holder that was at the Pro-Am when you were there, Jenna Adziana, and she literally just forgot how to bench with her lower half. And she was like freaking out about it. And it was between the second and third attempt, and I brought her over. And to me, it looked like she just forgot how to bench. So we literally just did what I would do with you if you came in day one into my gym. I said, all right, this is what we're going to do. You're going to set your feet. You're going to bridge your hips up, squeeze your ass. And then we're going to move your feet back and out until your ass comes down and barely touches that bench. And if your hips are maximally squeezed into extension, there is nothing mechanically that can push your hips up higher. So then your butt's going to stay down. And then, okay. And then she went over, she did it, and then she didn't bomb out of the fucking meet. So basically, my highest level lifter, and I don't know if this was exactly what was going on in her head, but she basically forgot how to bench with her lower half. And we had to go over that at the women's pro-am, which she ended up winning that day. And so even the high level guys like that is sometimes you have to just go back to the basics of cueing and coaching. And that's the best thing for your guys. And it's happened to me multiple times.
The other thing that really gets fucked up is more advanced lifters and then injuries or surgeries, right? Because now you're going to have some compensation patterns that I'm not a physical therapist or doctor. I'm just saying what I've seen, that have to stay there and will always be there. Yeah. Right. And then a physical therapist or somebody trying to fix that. Then they try to fix that. Then all of a sudden their lift goes to shit because their body doesn't function the way it used to because this tore the fuck off. It's no longer there.
Sometimes it could even be like for me.
Yeah.
I can't put my scap where I like to have it because I will go back to the pattern that tore my pec.
Yeah.
Even though it might be a better position, I just can't bench like that. Our mobility guy says it all the time. He's like, I don't need to make this person hypermobile. I don't want to have this high-level squatter hypermobile. I want him to be mobile enough to execute his squat with optimal position.
Yes.
That's it. If we go hypermobile, then he loses the tightnesses that made him a good squatter.
And will get hurt again.
And he will blow something out.
Yeah.
You know, so it gets convoluted, man.
No, it really does. Let's take a bathroom break real quick, and then we'll come back. Pop. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. You guys are selecting Marek for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. So there's a Table Talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are. Thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk, Marek Health, for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. All right, guys, I want to thank today's sponsor, Element. I'm having fun with ads now instead of just trying to like read through all the talking points and so forth. But there's a talking point here I have to read through. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything that you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt and no sugar. For some reason, that just makes me laugh. I've had and have been in the habit of drinking a half a pack before every leg training session, and all my cramping issues that I had went away because I've always had cramping issues on heavy leg days and leg days especially. How do your quads cramp doing seated leg curls?
For the longest time, and so I pulled my last deadlift in camera angles, of course. So I have one angle, deadlift looks clean as a whistle. Other angle looks like I was soft knees. Or soft knee, I got a big belly, so I don't know what the fuck this guy was looking at. But they started trolling me. And my wife gets fucking mad or fuck way worse than I do. So she's on here, she's like, this motherfucker does CrossFit. This motherfucker's got a 1,400 pound total. What the fuck is wrong with these guys? I'm going to message every one of them. And I'm like trying to be, an adult, which I'm not very good at. So I'm like, all right, just leave it alone. And this is right after that last meet. A couple, 3 days go by, and all of a sudden I get a message on my phone. It's just a fucking list. And it's all their usernames and all their max deadlifts. And basically my wife was like, you know what to do, because going back to that thing I said about deadlifting their fucking maxes, you know.
Oh my God.
So I was like, all right, man. It was a week or two out from the meet, and I'm like, all right, man. I'm like, fuck. And so I was like, I looked at it, and the top guy was 725. I'm like, if I pause that raw, that'll be a fucking PR. And I'm strong enough to pause like actually a real pause deal. I have all these weird variations, like almost how Louis used to have like 17 grips, right? I do that so I don't drive myself nuts if I feel like shit. Yeah. So I was like, all right, I have a pause where I wedge it off the ground as a pause, which is stronger somehow than my regular drive it off the ground and then stop. So I'm like, all right, a regular pause deadlift, a PRB 725. So I looked at these guys, I'm like, I could deadlift all these in rapid succession. So then I made a video, and I called them out, and I was like, suck it. And then I deadlift their fucking max. And then suck it all the way up. And then I paused deadlifted this guy's deadlift at 725. And now I'm on here saying that we shouldn't be listening to the fucking trolls. But I just did this like 3 weeks ago, man.
Such a colossal waste of time.
It was. And then I was all fucked up. You know, it was like I didn't hurt anything, but I was like, this is exactly how I fucked things up in the past. And my back, my SI joint was all fucked up for like 4 days. Like, you know what I mean? Like just a little tweak. But it was just, I don't know, man. I have no idea. I don't really get, afterwards I'm like, why the fuck would you give a shit? I looked, and then there was 2 guys on there that did CrossFit, so I'm like, well, they got enough to worry about, so I don't need to fucking do nothing with them. And so I don't know, man. It's just this weird fucking thing. It's like it's almost like I'm like, bro, why would you? I'm a very nice guy. Like, I'll help out people for free. Like, I put in my time with the sport. I try to follow what you fucking, you know, taught everyone how to do. And I try to be a nice guy. And then you get this random stranger that's like, hey, you don't have any integrity. You're a fucking asshole. And I'm like, you don't know me, man. And I should just think that way.
Well, they do what they do because they want that reaction from you, so they win.
I just feel like if I talk shit to somebody and they deadlifted my max at the end of a fucking, you know, ascending deadlift with a pause, I'd be like, well, I'm probably not going to troll anyone anymore, because that's... You
would think they care.
Yeah, but then they're probably just going to troll more.
But they don't care. You know, a mutual friend of mine told me 15 years ago that he made me actually, it was on the phone, he made me actually write this down. And it was, you know, thank you for the email, period. Your comments have been noted, period. Sincerely, Dave Tate.
It's like the HR response, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just that anytime anything at that point would be like, I felt like, fuck you, you know, and it wasn't just going to be a ghosted where I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
That was the copy and paste reply. It was in my notepad. It was everywhere. Just boom, boom, boom. Never, because they don't even know what to think when they get that.
No. Because then they're like, fuck, he didn't fall for the troll trap or whatever the fuck it was.
Just done. But, you know, I realize that when you get mad like that, you're actually giving them the response that they want.
I did that too. And I was like, man, I feel like I can kind of get around that by doing their max deadlift easy. But then I was just like, no, I literally responded. That was what I gave them.
Yeah.
I gave them what they wanted.
Yeah, then they know where to go again. Like if you ignore them, they just go someplace else. I mean,
well, that was what it was. Like for the longest time, I would just like delete, or if they did 2 comments, I just block them, and then it was like, oh, because now like I never wanted to be a yes man, but that's the only area in life where it's more beneficial to be a yes man. Like surround yourself with people that are like, hell yeah, man, keep going, and it's going to be a lot easier. Because I get so fucking nuts with this stuff, like. It will fuck my, I sleep, I have a weird schedule, so I sleep during the middle of the day with my son, because he takes naps, he's a baby, and so I'm like, and I'm looking at these comments, I'm like, this, and it's on my guys, it's not even they're not trolling me, they're trolling my guy, and I'm looking at this dude's page, and I'm like, I'm scrolling like 8 months back, and I'm like, this dude was in the fucking Wizard of Oz play in high school, let's dog this motherfucker, and then we get 10 guys on the post, and we're fucking ruining this guy's life.
I would say as a coach in this sphere, you have to actually you have to try even harder to avoid it, because everything that you do professionally is breaking down weaknesses of everything.
Exactly.
And so your whole life is looking at the negatives of everything to be able to help fix that.
Yeah.
You know, so when you see what I'm saying, so it's
yes. That's why I'm sitting there, I'm like, you hypocritical bastard. That's how it goes. But then part of me is like, dude, when everybody's like on their trolling and just acting all devious, I'm like, fucking group of savages. Yeah, dude. Yeah. These guys, like, I want people to be like, oh, these motherfucking guys from RPG or the Michigan BarBender guys, these guys are just fucking lunatics.
Well, perspective matters too, because you can go on social media and before you even open it up, you can think, man, I am looking for some cool shit right now.
Yeah.
You'll find it.
Yeah.
If you go on there neutrally, you're going to find bad shit.
Yeah, neutrally or looking for negative shit.
Oh, you're looking for, you're going to find it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. If you actually like put your mind to it and you're sitting there, you're looking, it's like, that's what's crazy about these people, like, oh, this one's for all the haters. I'm like, there's not a lot of haters out there. Like, most people are very fucking supportive. And they're like when you announced that I was going to be on here today, it was like nothing but great positive energy, great comments and stuff. People that I didn't even think that were following me very closely. They're like, I'm very excited to see this, all this stuff. It's like, that's great, you know, because that's the majority of the message that I want to put out there is like, hey, I didn't start out strong. Like, I know motherfuckers that did their first meet and pulled 600. I'm like, no, I was weak as shit. I blew my back out pre sciatica, like atrophy, with 275. I'm like, I took the entire journey, so I feel it's my duty now to educate everybody, and I have a unique space because I took every step of the way. I blew my back out with 275, and now I pull over 800 pounds. And if I have it my way, I'll pull over 900 pounds before I'm done. And so I have a unique perspective on every climb. I feel like if there's a guy that fucking deadlifted 600 pounds the first time, he's not going to know what it's like going from 450 to 500, because he's just going to be like, well, why are you not that strong? Like, what the fuck, you know? So,
well, your perspective also has all the coaching aspects, right?
Yeah.
There's the doing, and there's coaching, and then there's this hybrid in between, which is kind of where you're falling. So when you're explaining things, and even some of the things that you were explaining today, you're explaining them in a way that people will understand. Where I know perfectly well you can explain these in a way that they can't understand, you know, at a higher level. But it takes somebody that's coached a lot of people personally to know that doesn't work.
Well, we talk about this all the time, me and my coaches on Coaching Revolution with me, is we talk about this lost art of translation as a coach, which is, you know, you reach a certain level where you can teach the ins and outs to anybody that's going to learn it, because you have traversed that terrain already and you've conquered it, and you kind of can come back and revisit whenever you want. And so that's what I see a lot of these young guys coming out, is they speak in absolutes about training, when we know now that the more you learn, the more you know that the absolutes are the antithesis of anything that's going to happen with us. But they don't have... it's so crazy now. I go on rants about this all the time. Is like they're coaching people with biomechanics cues that you learn in academia, because they want to sound smart per the book. When I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, okay, for instance, story. I was in a college weight room setting, and this dude could not fire his hips. And I was like, all right. So he stood up, and I grabbed a fucking stick roller, shoved it in his ass crack, and he fucking went like that. And I was like, that's how you fire your fucking hips, okay? So now every time you stand up, you fire your fucking hips, and then magic to do with throwing squat bars off his back, right? I don't give a that's not a biomechanics book. That'd probably get you arrested. The guy was 18, guys. So that'd probably get you arrested nowadays. But the whole point of translating stuff is that if you bring your fucking car to a mechanic, you don't want to know the inner workings of an automobile. You want the motherfucker to fix it. My guys aren't going to have an exercise science degree, so I don't need to be talking about internal versus external rotation. Now, there are some that are more into it than others, and some, you know, coach to coach, I'll talk like this, but there's this lost art of translation and being a coach and being able to speak words and have people respond to those words and move and fix movements based on your words, without even touching them, and without getting them to understand it on a level that is akin to their knowledge base.
Yes, just so they'll do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's those are the times if I'm helping somebody technically where I get stuck, because you'll explain it one way, they don't get it. They explain it another way, they don't get it. You might have somebody else explain it, they don't get it. Then I got to walk away for a minute. Say like, look, just give me a minute. Then I walk away, then I picture myself being them. Like if I was them right now, knowing what their background is.
Yeah, how many squats they've done and all this.
Yeah, what sports have they played? What have they? How can I explain this in such a way that they've been coached by a hockey coach or a baseball coach? Or how can I explain this in some terminology that they're going to get, and then be able to come back? And it may be the weirdest sounding goddamn thing you've ever heard, but if they do what I want them to do,
then your job's done.
Yes, but the fucked up thing is when this shit's online, and I learned this the hard way. When this shit's online, people are like, you can't say that, you can't say that. So now I got to preface this and say, look, I'm looking for a desired outcome. I don't care what I have to say.
This happened to me. I was telling my guy chest up.
Yeah.
And this guy's like,
you'll get tore apart.
Oh my God, you can't say chest up because of an open scissor position, and then you're going to destabilize the spine and the lumbar. I'm like, dude, calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
It's like you just graduated from fucking the University of Phoenix with a motherfucking kinesiology degree that's probably fake, and you've trained one fucking person through a powerlifting meet. Okay, we don't need to learn. I'm not in a biomechanics lecture. I'm not teaching biomechanics. I'm teaching this motherfucker how to move more weight than you've ever had on your fucking back. So chill the fuck out. That just is what it is, man. It drives me out. It's like, but then it's part of that information sharing, right? They kind of have an area of what they would consider expertise, and that's the voice that they want to put out. So if they can try to discredit somebody or throw shade at the way somebody says something, then they feel that it makes them, elevates their status or however the fuck it is. It doesn't matter how many guys that you have or how many world records you have or how many guys with a total or how many athletes you have without injury over 6 years or none of this stuff. To them, it just matters if they speak in, biomechanics terms you copy and paste into a fucking textbook.
Well, that kind of goes back to you can't worry about what the criticism is because there's always going to be something they can throw at you. Yeah. Always. It's the same way there's always stuff that can be thrown at them.
Yep.
You have no real world under the bar experience. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Some of them might. Yep. So it's just this. It's a weird thing. I think it's getting better. Over time. It goes through phases.
Yeah.
But it's getting better over time. And there's every time I say that, it gets worse. Yeah. Because it does kind of go through.
I think it helps when we have coaches that are confident in their ability as coaches.
Yeah.
Because I went through this for a long. Like I had a stable of really badass lifters. And then, I'd have, an online personality or whatever the fuck we call them, influencer or whatever. And they'd call me out on something and I would kind of question it. And I'm like, and I'd snap out and be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you built these guys from ground up. These guys are animals. And you know that this is the way to go. And you have their best interest in mind. And you're doing everything actively every day to try to be a better coach, athlete, person, all this stuff. So what the fuck does it matter what these people say? And then I kind of talk myself through it and I'm like, okay,
Well, I've learned enough over doing the podcast, just hell in the past year and a half that, there's a lot of things that say I've said over the past 20, 25 years in written form or verbal form, which gets taken out of context.
Yeah.
Or because it's not in longer form, doesn't get explained in its full entirety. And then when I sit down and speak to some of the people that may have, criticized what that was.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to explain, well, here's what this actually is.
Or God forbid you wrote something when the company started and then you learned as a human
you can
being.
be wrong. There's definitely
and then you're like, hey, that was a little bit wrong and now I've learned. And they're like, oh my God, but you said this in 2010. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, if you're saying the same thing in 2010 as you do in 2023, then you're gonna have 2010 fucking totals.
Oh yeah,
just the way it's gonna be.
Oh yes, and it's 100%. It can be wrong and it can have changed, and it's the content. There's a lot of different things that kind of play out in there, but their argument. Meanwhile, it's funny because a lot of times whatever that argument would have been against it is 100% true.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're like, oh fuck, sometimes it was like.
That's what, like the open scissor thing with the chest. I'm like, that's correct. Yeah. But you're just putting it in a context that it's not in.
Yeah. Sometimes it was a matter of, didn't think of that, or my delivery wasn't right. There's usually it always falls back on me. There was something that didn't have enough context, something I was just wrong on, or something that the delivery wasn't the way it should have been because what they interpreted isn't what I actually thought or felt.
Yeah.
Which means that comes more on me for the delivery and not being, cognitive enough to be able to explain what I wanted to explain.
Well, there's something good that comes out of it because then it allows you to introspect and be like, hey, do I need to clean this up as a cue? But then if it's like, you're doing a good job and your person squatted better or whatever it is, then I'm like, fuck this guy. Let's send him a gold star and you put the sticker
for that, 100%.
on his fucking degree
for
biomechanics, linguistics. And now you're a fucking certified badass with the fucking vocabulary.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm talking two different things. For that end, yes, you keep doing that because you're getting results. But for this end, when you're educating the public.
Okay, sorry. I didn't follow you for that.
Yeah, those become
that's a whole different thing. It's like almost like you like the dark dingy gym versus this. It's like, okay, well, this has to have a certain aesthetic appeal when you're filming your content and all that stuff versus the other one. Yeah. Now, if you wanted to get the old crew back together from Westside, it's like the other gym would have been the way to go because then you guys could just put the vibe out and fucking go nuts. Oh yeah. But then this one, some of you guys go, this is too fucking clean in here, whatever the hell is going on, right? So there's contextual stuff. Now that's how it is. When when we're going to put out content with this stuff, it's all right. Who's our audience? Are we educating super high? Are we doing a seminar with coaches like you've done, or are we educating Gen Pop people? Are we educating bell curve powerlifters? Are we educating elite level powerlifters? Because that's a whole different conversation with the same exact. You could be talking about the squat. That's 4 different conversations.
Yes, entirely.
Yeah,
and that also becomes. That's a really good point, because that's sometimes where a lot of those criticisms come, is one of the other demographics actually see the content which was targeted towards one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm like. Okay, now for like the open scissor thing, I'll just use that because we already laid it out. It's like, okay, per academia, that's right. Okay, that's perfect. But per the translation and the art of coaching, and the guy, if he moved correctly, then this is right. Now they're both right, but my whole thing is like, that doesn't need to be said to give you a pedestal and say, hey, I'm a good coach. You know what I'm saying? I think I look at guys, I'm like, I don't care how this coach talks. If he gets his people to move the right way, this guy could sound, there's a friend of mine, I'm not even going to say his name, but he sounds like a fucking redneck when he coaches. But his guys are all beasts and they move great. And so then before I was friends with him, I started to pick his brain a little bit because his guys move so well and he would just talk plainly. And then I realized that he was a master level coach and a fucking wizard translator with the way that he coaches. And he had a very great knowledge base, but it was hidden under this fake thing that I had built up in my head before the way how I think now, about that you had to have this huge. Now, yes, we would like to have a certain level of articulation with our profession. Yeah. But there's just, you can communicate whatever way you have to get your athletes to respond, and that's just what it is.
How have you been able to vet out who to listen to and who not to? Because you just made a really good point. Because sometimes the people who can't articulate very well, that are just 100% grassroots, are fucking geniuses with what they're doing. Yeah. But if you see them or hear them, you're going to be like, not so much. Yeah. On the flip side, you can hear people be like, man, they really know their shit. And then you watch them do what they do and they suck ass.
Well, so it's when you're looking at something like that, like for me, it was becoming less ignorant and educating myself as to what I was looking at. Right. So like what we were talking about with me and Steve doing the squats, like, yeah, that's easy to get strong, just maxing out all the time. But it takes someone a little smarter to understand you can't do it for a long period of time, then you're gonna get fucked up, right? So I started realizing, I'm like, oh, well, like the Gen Pop choosing a coach. This is why that's why these internet assholes are popular and they make money. It's because the user base is ignorant and they're misinformed, and they have no basis on how to choose a good coach. They don't know that, hey, we should probably look at how many athletes have they had for more than 4 years. What's the injury rate of their athletes? How many people are stronger than them? How many people have they taken from this level to a high level? So I think the whole thing for me was figuring out what it is that is good coaching. What is that's informational coaching? Because there's a bunch of guys that I fell for in the beginning that just talked with big words, $10 words, and they were very good salesmen. They were articulate and they were to the point with stuff, and that sounds smart to the naked eye or the naked brain, whatever we want to call it, right? So like, and I would get fooled, and then looking back now, I'm like, oh, that's fucking trash. And what allowed me to navigate that was just training and having an eye on making myself a better coach and making my athletes better. And that's the whole goal every time that I step into the gym. And so navigating those waters allowed me to sift through the bullshit. And that's the hard part. So I tell everybody, I'm like, you're almost going to know when you know after you develop your own bullshit meter, but you have to dedicate some time to educate yourself. You know what I mean?
I know, but I've been trying to figure out how to articulate
that's the hardest part.
Than what that's what I would say. You know after you know.
But it's how like, the fuck? It's like, how it is. But like, it's like, what kind of variation should I choose for Conjugate if I'm doing my own program? Like, you're going to figure it out. I don't fucking know, man. Like why'd you do 7 good mornings out of 10? I'm like, I don't know. But at the end, I squatted more, and I just felt that I needed to do good mornings. You know what I mean? It's like, I could probably articulate that better, but still, just you're going to figure it out based on a lot of factors. It's it's just that education base, and then trial and error, putting stuff into practical use. All that stuff gives you that feedback, and then you start to see guys. Are they around the sport for a long time? Are they not flash pan people? Do they have a lot of guys? There's some coaches that have one badass gifted lifter, and then they get this social media prominence, And then that lifter kind of goes by the wayside, and then you realize they were a fucking terrible coach. You know, you get some people that have a lot of lifters because they're a strong lifter and they're a dog shit coach, but they're strong, so they have a good social media presence or whatever that is, you know?
I think if I'm to kind of talk through the answer here and to actually think about it a little bit more, I think the education base is necessary, but then being able to break down what the education base is into its biggest pillars, its biggest blocks, you know, say strength, endurance, nutrition, recovery, rest, and then how much variance is allowed that's going to cover the majority of the population. Right, because you're going to have outliers on both ends, right? But there's, you know, the basic stuff of each one of these main pillars. The basic shit is going to cover 80% of everybody. Yeah. Right. So if they can educate, if you can educate the listeners, whoever, you know, the basics on those pillars of that basics, you're going to cover, even as a coach, you're going to cover almost everybody you're going to work with. But I think what happens as coaches is you become more intrigued. You don't care about you care more about the outlying stuff. Yeah. Because it's fun, shiny, fancy. They're the pro athletes. They're, you know, the harder to train.
I think it's like once you become a coach for a long period of time, you get rooted in your system and stuff that works, and then it's easier. So that operates with X amount of efficiency, and then it becomes easier to pick the outliers out and then solve this new challenge and this new issue while this system's still in place and running efficiently. You know, so I like that, and I think that you know, what's cool about that in the long term with your coaching is that, you know, you're going to eventually solve a lot of these 80% issues, and then statistically there's only going to be X amount of outliers. So then after a while, it's not that you have all the answers, it's that you have the tools to work towards the answer faster.
Yes. Well, there also, like, you can have one of the outliers and not even know it because they haven't become the outlier under you yet. No. It takes time. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So anybody that's a genetic freak, they still need to understand it takes time to expose the genetic freak.
Well, you have to learn how to squat with max weights. It's like, I had one guy, my guy Sean McHugh, he's a former NFL player. He won a ring with Jerome Bettis and fucking played with Aaron Rodgers, all this stuff. Genetic freak, total 2000, like his second meet. And this dude is still learning how to squat and bench and deadlift. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, this guy he looks like a fucking G.I. Joe. The dude's this fucking wise, 6'4". He eats more carbs and gets like extra fucking abs in place. I'm like, what the fuck? And he, like, potential is unlimited with this guy because he just still doesn't know how to squat, bench, and deadlift right. And we're just working on technique. And it's just the 1% of genetics that we have to offer still takes time to learn stuff. You know, so I think a lot of people, you know, kind of misconstrue that as well.
So with RPE and intensity, how do you anchor that with the people that you work with?
So I came up with, well, first of all, I fucking hated RPE. I was talking shit about RPE for a long time, and then I always know that if I get too directional with one way of thinking, then I'm going to paint myself into a corner because I'm a hard-headed motherfucker. So I just look at that and I go, what the fuck is over here? Read on this and use it somehow and just figure out a way to make it work and try it. And so I was seeing all these, these little natty USAPL motherfuckers, and they're just consistent. They're injury-free. They're happy, you know, and there's sun shining everywhere and everything looks great. So I'm like, all right, well, there's something going on here because there's... At the very least, they're fucking consistent and they're injury free. And I don't care if they're using low percentages, whatever. I'm like, all right, there's something here. And then I started to use it and I loved it for my auto regulation, but then I saw the downfall of like, okay, well, I've been doing this for a long time. So I kind of figured out what feels like an 8 or a 7. And then my good buddy, Taylor Goen, he worked with like Ben Pollock. They were roommates. They came up with a VSP RPE scale, so it's like it's like a 2-man RPE scale. So like they have a whole fucking thing with it, but it's pretty damn genius. And it's like how they would come to like a 7.5 is if I thought it was a 7 and you looked at my video as an 8, we call it a 7.5. Yeah. But it's a 2-man RPE, stuff like that. But I started to figure out when I started to train my guys for strongman, I wanted to follow my conjugate system, but I didn't have the time in my yearly cycle to max out on all these bars to get my percentages. So in my head, I was like, okay, what if I want to do a safety squat bar box squat wave? I don't have a fucking max safety bar squat or a safety bar box squat. So if I can educate my athletes to use this RPE correctly, or at least in the realm of what I want, and I'm there to watch them visually and I help them decide on RPE, then I can start to run speed waves for different maxes based on an RPE scale. And then that opened up a whole fuck ton of stuff that I could do. So I could do every variation under the sun without having them have to waste time in their program and go through and max it out. But I really liked to follow Preplin's chart and stuff like that for their volume loading and everything. So I really wanted to stick inside those parameters, and then it really helped them get very, very, very strong. So I kind of implemented that in, and then what I saw was very effective. So part of this is people like for the West Side speed stuff, right? So part of this is maybe it's the intricacies of box squatting. A lot of people get wrong. And a lot of people get it wrong, and it kind of looks right, but they could still be fucking stuff up. So I was seeing that a lot of people were not getting the carryover out of the box squat, and they were also getting reliant on the gear too much. And so we wanted to train in 3-week pendulum waves, but I wanted to be able to use kind of like how I do opposite stance squatting, close stance, acid grass, raw, and I wanted to be able to do 3-week waves, and so I would use an RPE system. And if I know I'll do 3 tiers. I'll do a top set of 5 week 1 at an RPE 7, and then 8.5, and then a 5 rep max on week 3, and then roll back. If they can handle more volume, we'll do a 3x5 at RPE 7, and I'll have them set the first one at a 7, and then they'll do 2 more sets to match that weight. Week 2, they'll jump it a little bit, and then week 3 will be their rep max. And then if they can handle a fuck ton of work capacity, then they'll do 5x5 at RPE 7, 8.5, and then a 5 rep max week 3. But that allowed me to have a lot of control over the volume load on the dynamic effort / repetition effort day, and not have to go through and max each individual variation like that.
So how do you anchor that 7.5 or that 7? I mean,
So the way I tell them is I say I want damn near dynamic effort speed with no form breakdown and no sticking point or slowing down of the bar from start to finish. That's a 7 for me. If we have that, and I tell them, I said, what you would consider a working weight, the first one with all of those parameters. And then I tell them an 8 is if, like we do a lot of 5. So I say, if there's an 8 and we slow down on reps like 4 and 5, that would be an 8. With all of the other parameters, I'm like, if we slow way down on multiple reps in the set, that's a 9. And then if there's a form breakdown and we're barely grinding out the 5th rep, that's a 10. I don't want them at failure for a 10. So I kind of just back that down, If they were, in reality, maybe a 10 would be a fail. But yeah, I just back them up. So what I do a lot of times is I know that they're probably going to fuck up the RPE 7 and go a little too heavy. So I'll literally just have them hit an RPE 7 week 1, and I'll just add 5 pounds to the bar for week 2. Add 5 pounds to the bar for week 3, because I know they're going to be right in the middle. When we go back and calculate, they're right in that sweet spot, right in that power zone that I want them to be in, where they're going to produce the most work over time. And they, in their head, mentally, they're like, I'm only adding 5 pounds, fuck it. So they basically move the bar at the same speed across that, and they build a shit ton of volume in that 5 rep max PRs every time like clockwork.
Yeah, I've had I got a couple things to say that kind of funny that reminded me of this. I've had a bunch of people that I'll start a wave at 5x5, but I won't tell them anything because I know they're gonna do too much. I know they're gonna progressively work to wake it up, and the last set's gonna be a motherfucker. And so week 2 is really where it starts. Week 2 is 15% under week 1.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't they don't even know what's coming until that next one. It's just because you already know they're going to be a clusterfuck.
Yep.
But when you were saying that Taylor and Ben were working together, I used to have this thing I called a perceived max, PM, because you'd have a competitive max, which is a training max, and then a perceived max. And the perceived max would be, let's say I had it programmed 80% for a triple on whatever that day was. Well, as they're warming up, they're working to try to figure out, if I was to max today, based upon the sleep I have, what I feel like, what would be that perceived max? And whatever that perceived max is, you're going to take 80% of that.
Yeah.
And 2 people in the group had to agree. Motherfuckers were still, I would come in and they're missing shit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, how in the fuck
the bars on the straps are like, fuck.
How in the fuck are you missing? It's a fucking, first off, it's a perceived max for a triple, which means it should be lighter.
This happens. I see a 10-second grinder, and I'm like, this is week 1, motherfucker. motherfucker, it's a 7, dude. How the fuck?
Yeah, like how did this perceived triple become a miss?
And then I asked, I'm like, okay, is this? And so I do what you're saying. Like I put it on me. I'm like, do you know what a 7 is? Let's be a big boy. I'm like, let's be a fucking adult. Do you know what a 7 is? They're like, yeah. I go, so you're the fucking asshole. And they're like, yeah. I go, okay. So then we're going to reverse fucking, we'll drop 50 off that. But that was like, so in my head, I'm like, I'm thinking RPE 80, 85% is where I want you. If I say a 7, you're going to asshole your way to an 80.
No, of course.
85, right? Yeah. So that's kind of, and I did that. I learned that myself. I was like, okay, because first couple weeks, so when I want to put something in, I'll have, I test it on myself for 6-8 weeks. Or I'll maybe get a couple of guys or maybe some coaches where I'm like, guys, let's run an experiment. If we fuck it up, it's on us, whatever. Or if I got a guy, I'm like, this motherfucker gets strong walking upstairs. He's fine, whatever. And so we'll mess with it. And then I'd be like, all right, week 1, that's a 7. Week 2, that's an 8.5. Week 3, I went up 5 pounds for my 5 rep max. So I'm like, okay, that doesn't 8.5 to a 10 isn't a 5 pound difference on like a fucking 3-inch block pole. Like that's just, I should have had 40 pound jump. So I started to be able to dial it in, and then I would skew it myself. So I'd be like, all right, I know that I'm overshooting it. So then I would be like, all right, I want to jump a plate. Let's jump a quarter. And then, oh, there's my 7, you know? So but that's my gripe with it as well, is that it takes so much learning, but that's how I felt confident in it, is that I can help you establish an RPE. So, I'll get some estimates and some guys online. I'm like, I tell them like, hey, if you're even thinking that you're close to an RPE 7 and you want to go up, stay there until I tell you to go up. Or if I don't respond in time, then keep it there. And this is the start of the fucking wave, and you're getting good work in. We're going to be able to manage next week. If you really undershot it, we can add a quarter next week and you'll be fine.
I mentioned a little earlier about the change, you know, having different ages of athletes. How do you manage and work with that, having the different ages that the aging?
So a lot of these young guys can handle fucking way more volume. Yes. It's crazy. So I have that.
Do you lean into that though? Like
No. I don't lean into it too much, because I like to have them get into the habit of doing too little. Because a lot of my young guys, I'm fortunate enough to where it's like the fucking 21 and 23 guys are the guys that wash out. If I get a 17-year-old that's there all the time, this motherfucker stays in for life. And so I want him to because most of us, you know how it is. If you got a high level guy, and they come to train with you, it'd be really say, hey, do half the shit you do and you're probably going to be all right, because you fucking overtrain because you're nuts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I get these guys doing kind of the minimal recoverable volume to take a Dr. Mike kind of approach to that. And then what I'll do is I use that as a little bit of a tool, so that I can plug in some stuff that I know they need. So if they're doing log and they fucked up a couple of sets and we need to go over some training, I can have a little bit of wiggle room there, and like, let's go 4 or 5 more sets to learn this thing, and then I don't fucking overdo it for them. So I use that because I know that they're going to respond, because they're young. We can put them on a fucking bike and they're probably going to get stronger at that point, you know. So I'll plug and play a lot of that stuff per the athlete, just to figure out, or like if I know that some of these athletes kind of they're mentally fucked up for a little bit, you know, in terms of like going heavy. So I know I need to give them a couple of extra, you know, sets in there at the top end, and we might have to maybe miss a weight, come back and go get it, whatever it is. I'll kind of dial back their volume. Some of the guys, some of the people respond really well to like, you know, the 60% max effort volume on the accessory versus the dynamic day. So I kind of will just cut it in half. So some of the guys, it's like, okay, we have, instead of 4 sets on max effort day for the accessory, we just do 2 and get out. They just need to pump some blood, bodybuilding style, and get the fuck out. Some guys need all the volume in the world, and we do the same type of thing. We'll maybe go 4 or 6 sets of volume, whatever it is. And then same thing. And another big reason too is that a lot of those kids need skill acquisition with the implements or the barbell. So that's why I keep their volume at lower than what I know they need, so that way they can have more time with the barbell, or more time with the main specific skills that we're trying to teach. You know, some of the, you know, like, and that's why I kind of developed the system that I do. I know for me is, you know, one time, like, especially at this age, I'm not very old by any means, but I had a lot of fucking injuries when I was fighting. I had a lot of injuries in football that I had before I was fighting. Then I brought in all those fucking imbalances from being a fighter with your chin tucked like this into powerlifting and never fixed them. Hence why I'm all fucked up now. But I know for me, working up to a top set at a 7, is a pretty good fucking workout for me. And then week 2 is like, I got to bring my fucking balls to the gym to hit my 8.5. And then week 3 is I got to go into meat mode to hit week 3, which may be why I run into some recovery issues, because I have to tap into that mindset too often.
All right. But, so now when you hit that week 3, do you take out all accessories on that day if it is a balls out?
So usually what I do is on those days, I'll do more of just a GPP style. I'll hit that toe sled, 200 seated hamstring curls with a band, and then I'm done.
Got it.
And then a lot of time, what was crazy is I found out the system that worked really, really well with the conjugate style stuff is that I'll have the guys take a lot of them, they don't do enough GPP. So they'll do if they do a reverse band squat, they take that, I'm like, they're fucking smoked. So then they just get their GPP in that day. And then the next day is their repetition or their speed work, and then they do full body, total body, or they'll do the full bodybuilding style accessories. And then it seems to work really, really well. And then part of this is telling them and letting them understand that eventually I want them to be able to auto-regulate, and then I'm going to help them pull the pieces into place. So when they understand that I want them to be more hands-on with their own training in the long term, then they start giving me a lot more feedback. They say, hey, I know you have this plan for the deload workout. I just need to stretch out and walk a sled a couple times and I'll be fine. Okay, that's good. And then we start to, I would love to have them for a lifetime. But my goal with these people is to be able to have them coach themselves down the road to where they don't need me. And I feel like if I teach them how to auto-regulate correctly and they've been rooted in the system for so long, they will be able to do that down the road. I
can make the argument that if you teach them how to auto-regulate extremely effectively, they need you more.
Well, yes. Okay. So like I would say like how I do with Tinajero.
Yeah.
So I auto-regulate my own training. He's there as a consultant.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how I would like to get
fucking huge though.
He's the guy, he's like, that was a fucking asshole move. Like, don't do that. So but exactly. So I shouldn't say I leave them. I would consult them. Like, hey, I don't like that move. We should probably do this. Think about it this way. That's kind of what he does for me. He goes, hey, you should think about this in this context. You're thinking about it in this context. And I go, oh, fuck, you're right.
Yeah. See, that's what, because it takes all the low hanging fruit and makes them responsible for it and allows you to look at the things
at the big picture
that you normally can't see.
Yeah.
Even if you are auto-regulate, or you could, but the way you'd have to see it is to step back and macro plan the whole year.
Well, some of this, like sometimes like it's hard. Like you can step back and, hey, I'll look at their Google sheet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a fucking lot of data here that I can't crunch in the daily, weekly, because I'm managing all this stuff. And then you start looking, you're like, oh my God, we've been trending up 50 pounds a year. Like, this is fucking crazy. What are we doing that's good here? We start, start seeing that macro stuff. There's all this data. They can start to put together webs. It's like, hey, we increased her volume. We added 2 sets for back 2 days a week, and then her bench shot up fucking 50 pounds. And her bench load here, what happened? Oh, we took out this extra back day because it was messing with her shoulder, whatever the fuck it is. You got a million things that you can start to look into, and it's all this just... I think some of that with some of the technology of like the Train Heroic apps and some of the webbing, and that's what we want to get into with our site is... Like I want to develop webbing. Like you can start to work your way towards a weight by doing stuff on the back. And hey, we know this guy that benches 500 can do fucking 10 pull-ups at 270 pounds body weight. Where's your pull-up at? Okay, well, I'm not a 500-pound bencher, but I can start to trend my back strength to where I know that it has to be able to complete those. Yeah. So you start to have, there's all this stuff, and that could be, I think, some of the waves of the future where you start getting into, I think it was... Mark Teixeira, one of the guys that had like that stress index, stuff like I'm like, that's fucking genius. Like there's a lot of great stuff like that where that will be some of the X factor stuff in programming in the long term, instead of like, hey, we have a new system of conjugate 531 steroids, fucking this crazy awesome thing. You know what I mean? It's going to be all this knowledge that's in there in the data that we have that is going to lead to some breakthroughs. That was
one of the things that Mel Siff had me or helped me to determine with my own training looking back was we were looking for correlations. Like what was the floor press correlated to the meat press, assuming that the bench carryover is always the same. Gear changes, it started to fuck things up a lot because carryovers changes. But I would know, that the 2-board press was 90%, the 3-board was 92%, the floor press was like 87%. All these things were different percentages. Then we scaled it down to where, I knew the accessories that built those. I knew the movers that built the main lifts.
Yeah.
Like the close grip incline, the two board. There were 4 or 5 predominantly that built.
So then you see the one, and you're like, hey, that's slowing down, but this is the accessory that builds it. Where's the volume there?
Yeah, but we want even to that. Like this accessory correlated to the actual floor press. So if the floor press broke down, this is the accessory that has to come in. What dumbbell, if it's dumbbell sets 8 of 8, where are they now? Fuck, it's at 60. Well, no wonder the floor press is down. This has to build back up.
Yeah, and then you bump that percentage up and then everything flies.
Yeah, then 3-week cycle, get that back up, floor press goes back up, that
was like that old Louis story about the, what was it, the Olympic lifter, where that guy, the one guy that was like 550 overhead clean and jerk or whatever from the Soviets, and he started slowing down. They looked back at his training log. They go, what happened? Your volume dropped 20%, bumped it back up.
Yeah, but there's so much more that can go in that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy. Where where certain things like a suspended good morning did nothing. There was no correlation. Like, okay, there's no correlation here. I'm only doing it because everybody else is.
Well, that's what I want to surround myself with these guys on my team. Is I'm like, there's stuff in here that I don't even know exists, and I know it's in there, and we can figure out what this correlation is, and we can start to develop just really amazing training programs for everybody based on this stuff. And it's awesome, because then that's the next frontier for us. So it always gives us something to stay really excited about.
See, it's way more cool to just dig into shit like that than to look up fucking 20 people's deadlift that made a comment.
Yeah, no shit, man. I know. I think the same thing. I'm like, I spend fucking hours doing that. I'm like, you just wasted 3 fucking days of your life doing this, man. It's because it was back when we were training to fight, we would be out the bar drinking, and they knew we were the MMA squad. So we'd have the drunk assholes be like, bro, I have never lost a bar fight, and we had some really good fucking athletes in there. Some of the guys on the Central Michigan University wrestling team, and these are some of the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. To this day, I'm convinced some of these guys could literally just snap a human in half. And they would stay after and wrestle with us. So we got like elite level training for that space that we were in, just way higher level than we ever could have hoped for. And we had some bad dudes, and this drunk dudes at the bar would be like, yeah, let's fucking fight. So we wouldn't fight them in the bar. Well, we did a lot, but not most of the time. We'd be like, hey, dude, we have the wrestling room locked out. Come to the gym, and if you want to fight, we can fight for 2 hours. I'm like, we'll have people. We won't kill each other. We can fight for 2 hours. And out of all the years, 2 motherfuckers showed up.
I was gonna say, how many times did that actually happen?
2 motherfuckers showed up. One guy that showed up had the biggest set of balls because he was one of the smallest dudes. We heard he was beating up his girlfriend, so we were like, hey, you want to beat up some dudes instead of your girlfriend? Come to the fucking wrestling room. And then he showed up, and I had some really good leg kicks because I had like relatively strong legs. So I was like, I'm not going to knock this guy out. So I leg kicked him for fucking 5 minutes straight, and I put a contusion on his leg this fucking big. So in my head, I'm like, every step this motherfucker's going to take for the next month he's going to know I whooped his ass. And then the guy that was the really good jiu-jitsu guy, my buddy Shay, he rolled with him and fucking tapped him out, made the dude like kiss his own dick fucking 8 times. It was so this guy got fucked up, but that was the way that we handled things. It was, hey, if we have a problem, just let's square it up, And that, even when I was a young kid, it was, we had this little pathway that we used to walk home from school. It was kind of in between where an alley would be, but there was no alley. It was all woods. And if you had a problem with a dude, you guys would meet, and then you guys would just fight it out, So I was a punk rock guy, skateboarder with the fucking purple hair and all that. And this big jock guy had a problem. And he basically forced me to meet him there. And then I boxed him and I didn't lose, and that's when I was like, oh my God, this is fucking badass. Like, I didn't die, and I got so fucking pumped, And then I was like, man, I think I like fighting. And then cut to 5 years from then, my dad's like, you're gonna get kicked out of the fucking house if you don't join the MMA club. So that's how I started that. But it was just, I kind of grew up in this thing of like, if you have a problem, you're going to solve it, or just shut the fuck up. Like, so if you have a problem with a guy and you're going to talk some shit, then you're going to square it up physically, and that's going to be the way it is. Now I'm in this fucking, I'm in this generation of kids that have never been in a fight, never been in a pushing match. I talk to some of my young kids, and I'm like, have you ever been in a fight? Have you ever been in a tussle of any kind? They're like, oh God, no, I don't know what I would do in that scenario. And I'm like, that's just fucking crazy to me. I don't know. I don't know where I would be if I never learned those lessons, if I never got my ass kicked a bunch of times, so I never got, I got bullied a little bit when I was young. It was nothing crazy serious, but it was just, it happened. And it's just stuff like that. My uncle used to kick my ass, just as an older brother thing. I have a really close in age. My grandparents had him when they were 40, so he's like an older brother, but an uncle, but stuff like that. Just things that would make you tough.
We're learning how to fight back.
Learning how to fight back, or learning that, hey, I got something in me where I could turn a switch a little bit, like I can do something here,
You had a topic down here of coaching legacy. What are your thoughts on that, or why was that put down as a topic?
I put that down as kind of, it's kind of hard to word. I kind of started to think about it, in terms of like, what do I want to do with this in terms of just the coach? Like I think you said this before, a very good quote, but it was like, I want to have a legacy as a father and a husband, the first and foremost. This is, yes, 100%. I love that. I just like, I want my coaching legacy to be known as the guy that was responding to the DMs, that was willing to help out, that was, that was helping the young guys for free, that was actually giving a fuck about his athletes. It was, I remember years ago when I started to listen to kind of some of Louis' stories and stuff, and then as you start to navigate these waters with these high-level athletes, like I said, they're fucking savages, right? So you're going to have to take a large part of yourself, and people are going to dump shit on you, and they're going to think that you're a therapist and everything like that. And I told myself a long time ago that you are going to help these people through the thick and the thin. And like I said, I have a lot of guys that are lost, and I had some of the guys try to commit suicide, and some of my guys got into drugs and alcohol and ended up in rehab and tried to fist fight me when I went and, I'd meet them out at the bar and stuff. And that was it was a pretty traumatic experience when that happened. And it was just, I just never for once thought about not wanting to do this, because I told myself I was going to stick it out through the thick and the thin and help these fucking men. I feel like that these men nowadays, they need some fucking help, especially the young ones. They don't have a purpose. They don't have a drive. They don't know how to take on responsibility. They don't know how to navigate anything. And no one fucking helps them. I talk to these guys all the time, and they would, like people would just let these motherfuckers die in a hole if they let them. And I'm not going to let that happen. I want to reach as many of them as I can and get them to understand that somebody fucking cares about them and somebody cares about their progress, and that they can make life into what they want and they can build a fucking monster. I think I had this thing in my head coming up that there was just monsters and there was everybody else. So you can't transition. You can't cross that bridge. So I want to tell these guys that, and get them to understand that there are good people out there that care about you and care about your progress, and that you can make yourself into the fucking monster that you want to be, no matter what it is. If you get out of your own way and clear all the bullshit out of your fucking life, you can go be that fucking monster. Do whatever it is you want to do. I started to read your guys' articles. I started realizing, I'm like, oh, there's these fucking big, strong meathead guys that are intelligent and they're articulate and they're masters of their space. And at the time, I was a terrible fucking human being, but I told myself, that's fucking cool to me. I want to be one of the, it wasn't even being a lifter or what, I just wanted to be in that space somehow. I didn't know what it was at that time, but I just said, I'm going to clear every fucking thing out of my way and just go become that thing. And if I can do that, any one of these guys can do that. So that was kind of, it doesn't need to be numbers. It doesn't need to be world records. It doesn't need to be how many, of that I have. I just want it to be that I am going to have an impact on a lot of guys and kind of take, the message that you guys put out there and instill it into as many of these guys as possible so they can pass all this stuff on to the next generation. I don't see there being a lot of that going on anymore, and I don't really like that.
I don't think the word you're looking for is legacy. I think the word you're looking for is reputation, because with legacy, everybody thinks once you're past, repetition or reputation is what you do now. Yeah. And if that's what you're doing now, that opens up the possibilities for people to contact you and to get a hold of you and to look for that help now, instead of, that's where I always had that weird. That legacy's always just been weird to me for a lot of different reasons, where reputation seems to speak more actionable.
Well, that was so the reason why I put that on there is because I heard you talk about this in another one of your podcasts, and it was kind of a weird thing. And I noticed you've been putting in work and doing really well about like helping people kind of get to a thought. And so I was like, I figured you'd have a unique perspective on that. And it was, you know, like part of what I just said was like, I had access to a lot of these guys in a very good way. Like some of the guys that I was watching on YouTube, like at Detroit Barbell, you know, there's one of the guys, Tim Hensley, world record bench presser. He won the last man standing at the Arnold Monster. And I was like, these guys are fucking cool. This is cool to me. I want to be a part of this. And then cut to now, I coach him, and he was my bench coach for a long time, and we're good friends. He came to my house and drank beer with me. So I'm like that guy that had these idols, and now they're my peers, and I'm part of that group, and that was the most rewarding thing for me. It had nothing to do with the fucking numbers or the weights or anything like that. It was, I wanted to be this thing, and I went and fucking did it because I got out of my own way, and I educated myself, and I put one foot in front of the other, and I wanted to go make myself into something. Yes. And I want to have that be the fucking message where, what is it that's cool? That's kind of what I tell my guys when they're choosing a category. I'm like, I don't give a fuck if they think I'm going to put them in the gear. I'm like, what was the video or whatever the fuck it was you watched, and you're like, that's fucking it. That's my thing. That's what I want. Whatever that is, let's go there. And if you don't think I'm the guy, then find a coach that is. I'll help you find a coach that is. But that was what it was for me. It was seeing you guys back in the fucking 90s in dingy gyms, maxing out and everybody fucking yelling, because that was what it was like when I grew up playing football. That was what it was like when I had my group when we were rolling in the wrestling room doing MMA. And I wanted to have that thing, and I was like, all right, this is where the fuck I'm going. And it took me a few years to figure out how to get there, but that was when I knew that I found it. I was like, this is what I want to do. That was it.
Well, the reputation's online's a weird place, right? Because you never know the impact, because most of what you hear is the negative. So you got to become very, very like ignoring all that kind of stuff. But you know, if you can if you can help change just one person, that can change that whole generation of people that follow that person, right? Because a lot of people end up being, you know, like the circumstances that they grew up in.
Yeah. Right.
Where if that one person can change that circumstances, and every, you know, family underneath that one person can be a generational change just off one person. Exactly. Right. So it's a huge thing. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help, you know, people that are.
I think there's more people than what they think.
There's way more people than what they think, but they're afraid to put themselves out there because they don't want to get chastised and ripped apart online, because it's not the cool thing to do.
Well, exactly.
You know, and what all they need to do is to make it available for that one person, or, you know, open.
That's why I'm always trying to answer even whoever it is, whatever level of lifter it is, whoever, if they have a question or a comment or concern, whatever, I'm always trying to reach out, because I remember when I reached out to you and you responded, you said the thing about the depth. I reached out to Chris Duffin years ago, and this was before the Kabuki thing took off, and I reached out to him on Facebook Messenger, and I was like, why am I stuck at 6, whatever the fuck on the deadlift? And he's like, just keep pulling longer. And I wedged in, and I pulled for an extra 2 seconds, and I fucking hit like 8 PRs. And it was like, oh my God, these guys are responding. Like, you can reach out and talk to them. And in my head at the time, like, people don't understand like what it was with all of you guys when we got into this sport. It was like, you guys at Westside, it was like, it was the same as normal sports, right? If you guys would have had trading cards, we would have bought the fucking trading cards. We put you guys on this pedestal so you guys seem so far away. You know what I mean? And it was like, I remember we hear these Westside stories that Louis would say, and then we'd be like talking about them like you guys were like a fucking professional sports team. And you'd hear all this stuff, and you're like, oh man, I bet they did this was probably wild, you know, crazy shit like that. Like, you know, and some of this stuff for a lot of these kids that don't have it very good, like, that's all they have, man. So if they're reaching out to you and putting themselves out there when they don't want to, and then all of a sudden they get a no response, or you act like a fucking asshole, it's like you could shatter that motherfucker's existence, you know, or you could be the reason why they take the step in the right direction and become a bad motherfucker.
Yes.
You know, so that's what's cool about the sport from what I've seen. And that's why I don't like when people act like assholes and they try to get all this fucking multiply versus raw, all this shit, you know. It's like, because like what you said, it's like, hey, all of us like lifting heavy weight and getting better. Yeah. It's like, hey, we all like, that's what I love about the fucking deadlift. You know, you go into the deadlift, and if it's a PR deadlift, you stand up in that 1 second, and if you lock that motherfucker out, you are better than you were the second before that. And no one can take that away from you. You don't owe it to anybody. That's kind of the thing I've heard you say about playing team sports and shit like that. That's why I hated the football and stuff when I got there. But it's like, you fucking did this, dude. It's nobody else. You don't got to thank anybody else. You can't blame nobody else. You get out of the sport what you put into it. It's black and fucking white. And if you're not getting out of it what you think you should be, you got to put more in. That's the currency. Is what it is.
That's the one thing I love about it, right? And that's why, talking about the, responsibility or whatever, trying to get more people in the sport. That's why. Yeah. Because it's the ultimate personal accountability.
That's what it is. Right? It literally, that's what, I hate diving in, and I know I'm going to be fucked mentally when I get out of this thing, because my identity is wrapped up in this, and I'm trying to figure out a healthy way to, negotiate around that and everything. But I just took the concepts of what was working in the weight room and then put it into my life and put it into my relationships and put it into my financial side of things and everything. And then I have now the fucking best life I could ever imagine. I have a beautiful wife, a beautiful son, a daughter on the way. I live in a great house. I literally do what I love for a living every day. I get up, I go fucking lift weights. And then people pay me to help them lift weights. I mean, I was supposed to be a construction worker, a roofer, and build pole barns. That's what you do in my family. And it was against the grain to say, hey, I want to go fucking teach people how to lift weights. Like, are you fucking crazy, man? But I was like, I'm going to go do that. And now I get to do that for a fucking living. This is, if somebody would have told me, or if I were to show a picture of myself to my former self, they just laugh and be like, this is a fucking joke. You know what I mean? So this entire thing, and I know that you've kind of said this about the business aspect. It's like, if you're working on the weaknesses, you're trying to control all the uncontrollables, all that type of stuff. You're going to succeed somewhere, and you have to be able to understand that you can put this into every part of your life.
Oh yes, and find and take the time to actually look for the successes, because that becomes one of the negatives
huge,
of being a powerlifter, because it's all fix a weak point, fix a weak point. We can fix a weak point. The same way in business, it's always fucking fix. There's a list of shit I got to fucking fix, but every now and then you got to step back.
Well, you got to look back, and you got to appreciate how far you came. Yeah. And it took me until the last probably couple years where I started to do that, because it used to be like, all right, total's at 19, whatever, it's not 2,000, you're a fucking pussy. Mm-hmm. That is what it is. So how do you get closer? How do you get closer? And then that was why I ran into so many injuries, because I would just push so hard in the gym trying to get there and just not taking my time and getting too greedy with stuff and getting angry, doing whatever. And then when I started to back up and start to look at, hey, you added 500, 600 pounds to your total. You can add another 100. And then the pressure was off. And then it was like, all right, now we're having fun again. It's good. It's fun to train. It's not, hey, if I go in and miss this lift today, my whole fucking day is ruined. And I've seen this out of lifters. I got a couple of close buddies that are like this. And I told him, I go, dude, he's like, what's been going on? Why has my meets been going south? Multiple meets in a row. I'm like, you're not having fun. I haven't seen you have fun in 2 fucking years. And I've been having a blast, and I'm hot right now. 3 meets in a row, PRs, even though shit's not where I want it to be. But I also know now that I don't need to be angry at that. Progress is fucking progress. And to me, it's going to be what it's going to be. If I had to get out of the sport tomorrow, if I died tomorrow and I'm on my deathbed, I know that I put my best effort in. And I know that I'm never going to be able to discount myself for that. I'm not going to be mad. And let's say you meet that perfect version of yourself. I know that version of myself is going to respect what I did, because I went as hard as I could, and I tried to turn every fucking stone there was.
I would be... maybe there is a handful of people this has happened to, but I don't think it's ever happened to anybody. No lifter has ever had the perfect meet. No. So if you want to total 2,500 pounds, you kind of need to be capable of 27. Yeah. Right. And that's just how it works. Yep. Right. Yeah. And it fucking frustrates the shit out of you. Right. Because that's kind of how it is.
Every fucking time. So, I mean, but that's a good thing, because part of me seemed like, what would have happened if I would have did that? But then, you look back at, hey, well, you did pretty fucking good without going perfect. Never went 9 for 9 in the gear or something like that. But some of this shit, I've never benched what I'm capable of benching. I've never even came close to that. This was my first actual deadlift PR that I hit. In a beat, yes, I know that platform PRs are the only thing. It's just a little frustrating when I've pulled 845 for a double and my PR, you know what I mean? So it's shit like that you can hang your hat on. But for me, the integrity and the character behind the whole thing is that I showed up and put in work that I'm proud of every fucking day. I love grinding it out, and I know that I completely transformed my life from doing this and having that work ethic and wanting to do the hard stuff. I can look back and say, hey, you chose the fucking hard way because you wanted to become a hardened individual. And especially nowadays, I feel like there's fucking weak men everywhere. And my old man gifted me with this resilience and this strength. And it would be a fucking travesty if I wasted that, especially nowadays when there's so few of us that have that. Mm-hmm. So.
Were there any topics that I didn't bring up that you wanted to talk about?
I got a couple.
Yeah. Fire.
So we wanted to talk about, I was chatting with Steve and a couple of my guys. We feel like you don't ever talk about this, and I want to know how fucking, what were the pivots and some of the pressure and all this stuff like over Corona when shit was going south, and then Rogue was like trying to step on your shoes and coming up in that space.
What do you mean step on our shoes?
So like they just got so fucking big, and they were all, and then you have like places like Titan that are undercutting equipment.
So are you talking all the same time frame or different time frames?
Different, the whole thing. How did each one, if they were different pivots or if they were the same time frame, like to have a business like this and do things the way that you did with all the free stuff, that's a fucking nothing short of a miracle.
Well, it's sticking to that. It's to address each one. I've always, on an annual basis, I'll do a competitive analysis but that becomes weird, right? Because I'm trying to do a competitive analysis, then I can look at the equipment side and say, that before Rogue there was York and there was different. There are other companies. So then I'm doing it in a competitive analysis there, but yet they provide no educational content. Mm-hmm. But that's part of what we do. But we don't charge for the educational content. So that became weird with it. Just then it's like, okay, now from the content side, I need to do a competitive analysis against the companies that are putting out content, like a T Nation and stuff like that. How do we rank and how do we compare advantages, disadvantages compared to them, but yet they're monetizing content. We're not, so the competitive analysis has always become one of those things where I still did it and still do it, but it becomes hard to really compare against a true competitor because what am I comparing? Okay. Right? Because if anything, the closest, as fucked up as this is going to sound, the closest competitor would be like InfoWars. Okay. Right? Yeah. Because they're selling product to be able to pay for the content that they put out. Yep. Right? And there's nothing else in the space that kind of really does that. And then there's, over the period of time, there's been pros and cons associated with that because, for a while it was a positive, it helped. And then after a while, people see free content is not value. Yeah. Right? It's complimentary. It's not free. That's what we're like figuring out with the price point stuff. And that's what I was like, there has to be a stroke of genius behind this because I don't, that's what we're talking about with me, is that I always want to kind of take your guys' model and offer some stuff for free. And then if they understand the quality and how much we give a shit, which doesn't really sell much. No. So then I was like hoping, and then my guys are a little bit more financially savvy than me, and that's why I had to have them around me. If I look at the competitive analysis and I'm looking at total sales, what a lot of the companies you mentioned do more in sales in 1 or 2 days than we do in a year. Okay. Right. So there's a vast. I didn't know. Okay. No, there's a vast fucking difference there. Very vast. Right. Where they have to deal with problems and issues. I mean, they got Rogue. I think it has 1,500 employees. I got like 12. Yeah. So it's not even. I just didn't know if like there was some pressure coming into them getting to the point where, all right, if Titan's offering a fucking rack for $12, it's like, how the fuck are you going to compete with this custom awesome shit, So I didn't know if there was any heat punching on you from that. There's always been that, because before that there would have been New York Barbell. There's other, cheaper alternatives where with that, the decision was made from the start. We're going to go the highest quality we possibly can, because what I don't want to deal with is customer service issues, returns, and shitty product, and have to deal with the cost associated with that, so that always stayed there. But then it was, what are the other products? And from the very beginning, if I'm to go way back, when it was selling Louis stuff, the equipment helped build the business, because you would buy the rack and it would ship in, say, 8 to 10 weeks. I have your money for 8 to 10 weeks. Then I would buy books or whatever it is and sell those books, make a profit on those books before I had to pay for the equipment that shipped out. Right. So I was able to float that money. Now, so did that help you, the West Side sales stuff? That helped you figure out how to very fucking beginning. All equipment helped, all payment terms kind of helped from there, because I could float it. Now, if I fucked up, bought the wrong books and they didn't sell, then that happened a lot. There was a problem there. In the beginning, when Rogue first came out, they disrupted the entire industry, because average shipping times might have been 12 to 16 weeks, and now they're 1 week. The freight costs, their freight costs were very low, which they just built it into the price, so
Yeah.
So it's that was a bit of a disruption from that side, but it's just that side. There's still the other side, which is, the wraps, straps, all the other kind of shit that's there. So now with lockdowns, the pivot that happened there to get more to what you're talking about is everybody else in this industry were selling out of shit and we weren't selling anything.
Yeah.
We are selling just normal. And I'm kind of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah, people should be buying custom racks because everybody's going to their basement.
Well, they should just be buying racks. I mean, they weren't even buying any of our stuff.
Yeah.
And then two things were kind of simultaneously happening at the same time. The bigger companies were shutting their sites off because they couldn't take orders anymore.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're like, where the fuck are we're just doing like average orders.
Yeah, where's the
and then I started to get a giant influx of DMs and emails apologizing for not buying product from us because the shipping costs were too high compared to the competitors. With shipping, I've never built the shipping into the price, and I've never ate the shipping. It's like, here's what this is, here's the shipping cost. Everybody else kind of builds it in there. So our shipping cost, we're not profiting on shipping.
No.
But we're also not eating the cost either. So they were buying from everybody else because the shipping costs were too high. And I'm like, okay, now fuck, this is a problem. Right? Because now we're not getting sales at all during a time when the demand is high as fuck. And they're apologizing because they've loved the content for the past 10 years, but still went and bought from everybody else. Obviously, the content doesn't have the value I thought it did.
Exactly. Okay. Yep.
Right. So I let the content staff that we had matriculate. People kind of come and go. I let it matriculate down to just 2 people basically. And we stopped putting out content almost entirely on YouTube and everywhere else. Cause I'm like, I took all the revenue that was going to staffing and all the content and started eating shipping costs. And when I started doing that, sales started to come up, but they also started to come up because all the other sites shut down. So that kind of got us through that point. Good and bad looking back, we didn't have a giant 2020. We didn't double or triple sales like other people did. We had like a 10% growth. And which is easier now to navigate the numbers because some of the other companies that really blew up during that time were 400 or 500% higher. Now they got to figure out what the fuck to do because they built other locations and they hired all these people.
Yeah, they went nuts to figure it out.
Because it's all kind of bottomed back out. But during that time, it became a matter of 2 things were going through my mind were I got into this to be able to provide content for the reasons of the live, learn, pass on. That's the core value of what this all is. If products can't support the content, there is no content. Then what do I do? Well, now I have to figure out how to have the content pay for itself.
And that's where the podcast came. That's where
the podcast came in. That's where the looking for the sponsors came. That's where the podcast crew, the join the crew, which is in the description, guys, to be able to, the Discord group that we have that's got all the free ebooks and special podcasts and extra podcasts and all that are all on there. That became now as this comes back from 2020 to 2023, I can still use the revenue that was going there to eat shipping costs, which is a temporary solution because as it scales, I'm not going to be able to do that. So that's only but it's got to scale a lot before that becomes more of a problem. So the shipping costs have been a little bit under control because we're eating a part of it. And then the content over the last couple of years, we've been able to get to a point to where now it does pay for itself. The podcast, the articles, all these things do pay for themselves after whatever the 2 years is going to be. So as it moves forward, it's going to be, there is conversions from sales, right? So we're selling our own product, through the podcast, and that's factored into this too, as far as how that converts into the sales. But if it wasn't for that situation, then we would probably be in a not a good situation right now. Because
that was like to the outside, I was like, how the fuck are they hanging on, man? This is wild.
No, we would not, because it's when you're talking just basic content expense at that time with full salary that we had, it was over $500,000. So you got that going out as far as content expense, and then trying to figure it. Back then, I'm like, fuck it, whatever, man. Yeah, it's bringing in enough sales. Yeah. But when I had to really start looking at how much sales does that really bring in, because that $500,000. I don't make every dollar on the product that's sold. There's margins that are small.
Everybody
margins.
Thinks you're rich. Yeah,
there's small margins. It's like, geez, holy shit. This has taken almost all our revenue just to do that. So we're almost at zero profit because of this. Now, with that pivot, now we got a better handle, on how to take it and how to build it, but yet still provide enough value in the content that's going out that the mission of the company stays true to what it is.
Yeah, you didn't have to change, sell out, or anything.
No, because I will never put everything behind a paywall. Yeah. Because that goes against the reason why I made the company in the fucking first place. If I got into this just to make money, I would not be in this fucking industry. Yeah. I make more money in other businesses I'm a part of than this fucking thing. This is more of a thing to help with what we were talking about, help other people find training and use it to better their life and become better at what they do, and then have it out there for the people that can't afford a coach or can't afford.
That was exactly how I got on.
All these other things.
I reached out, and it was like, even at that time, it was new, $250 for a fucking email per month. And I'm like, I was in college. I'm like, I had fucking a hot dog with cheese on it in the last 2 weeks, man. Like, I can't afford it.
Yeah. And somebody needs to do that because of what you're talking about. I mean, there's people that are lost. There are kids that are lost. I was lost. You were lost. A lot of people listening to this were lost, and they found whatever we were looking for in the fucking weight room. Yeah. Good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. It might not be therapy, but it fucking worked.
It fucking worked until we figured out what else could work.
Yeah.
It fucking tied us over, and it made a difference, and it helped. And if my greatest fear is all of that goes behind a paywall. Yeah. And then what the fuck?
How many kids are left out in the wash?
Exactly.
And then if they are the deviants of society or the deviants from the norm or whatever it is, the people that we know are in powerlifting, especially that were in our space with the gear and stuff, then it's like, okay, well then what happens to them? Then they're going off and doing some stupid shit. We don't know what happens to them.
Exactly.
I don't like that. It's for me. It's all right. Help as many as you can while you're here. That's just what it is.
Yeah. No. I want to state that the way the business was run for the first decade is not sustainable for somebody doing this now. You can't just go out and give all free content and then hope that the generosity of the people using the content is going to come back to you. It will not.
Yep. I learned that the hard way.
Yes, it will not. It's a lot of that stuff is just, maybe it was true. Maybe it was true for a period of time. The more people that help, the more is going to come your way, all that other kind of stuff. There's a lot of caveats to that. But in the world that I'm seeing today, no, that's not true. There has to be. But if you put everything behind a paywall and you're not helping people on the front end, you're not going to make it either. Actually, you're probably going to have it worse.
Yeah, I think so too.
At least if it's somebody that's just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, there will be enough, and there will be enough that will keep you sustainable. Yeah. If it's ebooks, t-shirts, or whatever it is, if you're making an impact, there will be enough. When we first pivoted this podcast to have people support us, for the crew, there were a couple hundred people. We don't have thousands of crew members. We just got like 400. So it's not like 1,000, but there were like 150 that immediately, the first pitch was, look, we want to do extra podcasts for you guys. That's all we would like to do. So we set this thing up to help you guys support the podcast. But until we get 200 members, I can't justify the resources to do an extra podcast. So in good faith, we're striving to that, but we may not hit that. There are 130 people in the first month that did that. Now, that's not enough to pay for the whole content crew and all the other kind of, all that. But the point I'm trying to make is there were enough people that gave a fuck just based upon the fact that we've been helping people over a period of time, that they're like, look, we want to see this work. We want to see this succeed, and put that out there. And then, I don't know, 9 months later, we had an extra podcast episode, and and now the whole thing, the crew is great. Actually, the crew price goes up next week. So if you want to join now. Link is in the description. The max effort thing that we did on Wednesday, there's a whole extended version and an ebook, and I don't want this to be a big sales pitch, but it is there. Click on it, join it, and we'll go from there. So yeah, that would be, because I consult with a lot of you guys, that on things like this, like where is that? If you're going to make the mistake on too much free. Yeah.
Okay. Well, pretty smart for a meathead, Dave. I just want to say thank you, man. This was a bucket list thing for me. I remember getting my first Elite FTS. It was the white shirt with the fucking jacked up chicken with the American flag shirt.
The Cockstrong.
The Cockstrong one. And I came in the mail and I was like, fuck yeah, dude, my total's going up, So that was way back when I was training with the big guy, Ron. And I remember making my first set of boards, and it was crazy. It was like almost going through fucking puberty, man. I remember the smells and the fucking training and how pumped I would be just to go. And I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And so when you reached out, I got the DM and I was fucking yelling in my house. I'm like, yeah. And my wife's like, thought somebody died or something. So no, I appreciate it. And I just want you to know, like, I don't feel you get the credit, but you ushered in and set the standard for, there's hundreds of coaches around the nation that came up just from the free content that you offered, and they realized that it's not just about the numbers and pumping out world record holders, but you got to be a good person, and it is your duty to get strong and pass to the next round of guys. So I just want to say thank you for all that, because it's hard to notice, because I try to notice it online, but there's a million of us that talk all the time in the underground, and I don't think the sport or the etiquette of the sport would be where it was at without you.
I appreciate that. The thing that's the most satisfying thing to me is when I can sit across and speak to somebody like yourself and other ones that have come out here that have come up learning from the site, or the site was part of that whole learning process, and then to see that your coach, that you're coaching people now and doing the shit that the Live, Learn, Pass On was founded for, to actually see and be around long enough. Thankfully, I haven't died yet. Be around long enough to be able to see that it does. As dumb as this is going to sound, it does work.
Yeah. It's about being like, you could feel it through the message of the site and the company is like, this is about being a good person. It's not just the weights, and it's about passing that knowledge on to help people, like we just talked about. And that was that came through to me as a very positive message when I first got into it, during a time when I needed to have some of that positivity. And I had always been, I felt like I always had a lot of friends, but I always felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. And then finally that came along, and with all the articles, I was like, I didn't know any of them, any of you guys. And I was like, these are my fucking people. Finally, like, this made sense to me. And that was what I wanted to do, and that's what I went and did.
Yeah, so there's people you're helping now, you see what I'm saying, that 20 years from now will come to you and be able to say, and you'll see they're helping people. That's the coolest thing, is people can say things, and this helped and this helped and this helped. But when you see that they're actually doing it, that's cool. To me, that's cool as fuck.
I can only imagine how cool that, because this was a seed how long ago, for you. This is crazy, man. Yeah. But this was circa I was 20 years old. I didn't even know what the fuck I was doing with life.
It's crazy, because when you're online, you don't even know who's hearing the message either.
No. And then it was, even then it was like, we couldn't really comment and do all this stuff, whatever. And then it was, we went in, I came to visit the old compound, and you had probably no idea who the fuck I was, but that was like, for me, it was like, I was like fucking taking a step up the mountain, taking a step. And then it would be, and then I'm competitive with the coaching aspect. I'm very competitive against other people. And I would watch them on the podcast. I'm like, that motherfucker's in my chair. I'm going to get on that chair. And I don't know how the fuck I'm going to do it, if it's more records or more content or whatever it is. But I was so pumped, because I however you can work to be on a podcast if you're chosen by somebody, I worked for it, man. That was what it was.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming out. Thank you guys for listening, and we're done. His Instagram, all of his information is in the description. Is there any place you want to plug more than anything else?
Coachingrevolution.net. We have a discount code.
There you go.
And I'll put it in the description, and the guys are going to hate me because I'm supposed to memorize it. I think it's like Table Talk 10% off, something like that. But
It's probably Tables Talk 10.
There's something on there. It's on my phone. I'll post it on my social media. Coach_P_strength.
Or have any of your people go and make a comment on the YouTube, make a comment wherever it's posted, and we'll pin the comment.
Make a comment. Shout out Rochester Performance Gym, the strongest gym in Michigan.
Michigan.
I'll take it. You know, it's a big state.
No, I love Michigan. I love Michigan. I have no problems against Michigan. They saved my fucking life, so I'm cool with that. We're out. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. You guys are selecting Marek for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. There's a Table Talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are. Thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk, Marek Health, for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. All right, guys, I want to thank today's sponsor, Element. I'm having fun with ads now instead of just trying to read through all the talking points and so forth. But there's a talking point here I have to read through. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything that you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt and no sugar. For some reason, that just makes me laugh. I've had and have been in the habit of drinking a half a pack before every leg training session, and all my cramping issues that I had went away because I've always had cramping issues on heavy leg days and leg days especially. How do your quads cramp doing seated leg curls? But